Classes in session, hitting the books, college football betting show on the air once again for week 7, if you can believe it. We're already at week 7 in college football. Ian Cameron and Connor Mack from apparently a very hot Las Vegas, even though it's early October. The heat has not gone away, apparently, in Sin City from everything
Not
I'm
really.
seeing.
Yeah, it's still warm. The mornings are starting to get a little. That's why I was wearing this jacket, but yeah, it might have to come off. Yeah, it's starting to heat up.
It's heating up in college football too. I mean, my goodness, we're into October now, and the conference races are heating up. The playoff races are heating up. Of course, now there's 12 spots available in the college football playoff, so it definitely makes for some more exciting, games and more opportunity, for progression, I guess, for a lot of teams that in years past you just wouldn't see that opportunity. Where do we begin? I mean, obviously, just quickly, we always like to recap briefly on last week. The headline is all the upsets, clearly. I mean, it was definitely a week of one upset after another, ranked teams going down to defeat. Missouri losing to Texas A&M, I wouldn't make a big deal of that. I mean, both teams were ranked, but it was just kind of shocking that Missouri was that outclassed in that game on Saturday by Texas A&M. Certainly that's a game that stands out. How about the Arkansas Razorbacks taking out Tennessee and winning outright as a 14-point underdog in that game? Obviously a huge development there with what transpired. How about Minnesota rowing the boat? PJ Fleck might have rowed the boat to saving his job, quite honestly, at least temporarily, with that win against USC on Saturday night. And again, Miller Moss and the Trojans offense looking human away from home like they did against Michigan. And once again, that Minnesota defense really bottled them up. And once again, just like the Michigan game on the road, I don't want to hear anything about Danton Lynn anymore in this much improved USC defense. I don't want to hear it. Shut it. Okay. Michigan, the game was on the line. You gave up an 80-yard run to Michigan in that game to Edwards to put him in the red zone and give him a chance to win and run out the clock. And then with the game on the line against Minnesota, again, couldn't get the stop that you needed to win that game against an offense that's been very pedestrian all year too, the Minnesota Golden Gophers. So Minnesota takes down USC. Again, they were about a 9-point home underdog in that game. And of course, the mother of all upsets Saturday was Vanderbilt, obviously against Alabama. We sung the praises of Vanderbilt all week, last week on the show. I know we were on here. We both liked Vanderbilt. We thought it was an obvious bet against spot for Alabama coming off the win against Georgia. Not only was it a win against their rival, it was the emotional factor of it. It truly felt like that Vanderbilt game for Alabama was the emotional hangover of a lifetime. You think about everything that went into that Georgia game, where you had the big lead early in the first half. You looked like you were going to run Georgia right out of Bryant-Denny Stadium. And then Georgia answers back, battles all the way back, erases that huge halftime deficit, takes the lead with like 2.5 minutes left. And then on the very next play, Jalen Milroe finds Ryan Williams for the game-winning go-ahead touchdown. All the physical and emotional energy you had to exert against Georgia in that game, and you could see it. There was a hangover against Vandy. And that's not to take all of it away from Vandy, Connor Mack, because Vandy played a very good game. The reason I thought they were dangerous is because of their offense. I think Alabama's still having nightmares of Eli Stowers right now as we speak, who absolutely torched that Alabama secondary in that game for Vanderbilt. And again, they have a very experienced quarterback in the transfer out of New Mexico State, Diego Pavia, who we thought had the acumen and the ability from the quarterback spot to engineer maybe not an upset like that, because I certainly wasn't sold on Vanderbilt winning that game. I was just saying, they can hang within 3 scores against a potentially emotionally hungover Alabama team. But obviously they did a whole lot more than that, winning outright. And there was nothing fluky, C-Mac. Vanderbilt was the better football team for the majority of that game. They capitalized on some Alabama mistakes and Alabama turnovers early. And obviously Vanderbilt it's going to be hard to top that. Right now it's the upset of the season. And I don't know if there's going to be anything that tops it. But C-Mac, a crazy day of carnage on Saturday this past weekend in college football.
Yeah, a couple of games. I'm glad I was on the over in that Vandy game, and I had Vandy to cover, so that was nice. And right at the last minute, I took Arkansas, and that came through. I had some tough losses. We're going to hit through them in a few more games. Like I just maybe should have been on. I wasn't, but it was still a good week in the end. A couple tough losses. I thought I had this over in they had like 925 yards. North Carolina Pitt, Babano. They had 10 minutes left for one touchdown. Nothing else. The rest of the way in that game, and having Duke up 14-10 after 3, miss a field goal late to not cover that game. Pretty awful. That should have been a cover through and through against Georgia Tech. So there was a couple of losses, but yeah, big upsets. I can't complain. It was a solid week, at least for me. So I'm ready to roll. Let's get into week 7.
Yeah, no doubt. It was a pretty Virginia, a great comeback against Boston College, no question. Georgia fails to cover again versus Auburn. They still haven't covered a damn point spread this year, Georgia. That's crazy, but here we are, and Georgia's still looking for their first point spread cover of the season. So pretty crazy stuff right there from the Bulldogs. Now, some sites have them at 1-4 against the spread, but that 1 point spread cover, I think, was no. They're 0-4 against the spread. I've got them at. They didn't cover against.
Did they push on one of those?
Yeah, they haven't covered against anybody. Yeah, they played. Oh, they did. Sorry, Clemson. Yeah, that's okay. 1-4 against the spread. Yeah, they covered against. I forgot about that but they haven't covered since. That's the problem. That Clemson game, just put them in a stratosphere rather. That just all of a sudden they haven't been able to live up to it, at least not from a point spread standpoint. But crazy Saturday of college football. A lot of fun games. How about Miami? They almost went down as well, but they rescued themselves. It's a horrible loss for Cal. Horrible. They should have won that game. I know Miami's explosive with Cam Ward, but that defense way too passive in the latter stages of that game. That was definitely Miami getting away with one, and that's twice the Miami Hurricanes have gotten away with a game they probably could have and should have lost. The Virginia Tech game at home the week before, and then, of course, at Cal on Saturday. Crazy week, but now we turn the page and look ahead to week 7 in college football. And yes, this week is the start of Tuesday night and Wednesday night college football. Now, it will begin with Conference USA, and then it'll become MACtion later in the season on Tuesdays and Wednesday nights. But it's Conference USA for now that we get in the middle of the week, starting with Tuesday night, Florida International and Liberty. We've got the Liberty Flames, 17.5-point home favorites, 54.5 being the total here in this game. Now, Liberty is a team that in recent games, they have that look of a team that is starting to get their shit together, starting slowly to resemble, a large part of what we saw last year from this team. Explosive offensively, able to take over with the run game, wear their opponents down. It's exactly what they did to East Carolina, their last game, 35-24, before the bye week that they just had. Caden Salter had one of his better games at the quarterback spot. We know they've got a terrific running back in Quentin Cooley on this team, and they're able to run, they're able to throw, but run first is what they want to do. This goes back to when Jamie Chadwell was the head coach at Coastal. He's always a guy that wants offensively to have his team be able to run the football and be a run-first offense, and we're certainly seeing them showing signs of getting back to that. That, by the way, that East Carolina game, as fortuitous as it was for Liberty that they covered, they still got their first point spread cover in that 35-24 win against ECU. But I continue to look, CMAC, at this schedule for them. Campbell, New Mexico State is one of the worst teams in FBS college football. UTEP, who's an absolute disaster. Okay? They had the scheduling spot of a lifetime gift wrap for them last week against Sam Houston, and they were inept. They were absolutely fucking inept and abysmal in that game with a schedule spot that was a dream spot for UTEP. And that's how bad they are right now. And, Liberty played them. And then they played an East Carolina team that I'm starting to think is just not very good this year. Because what happened to East Carolina on Saturday? Oh, yeah, they got blown out by Charlotte. Charlotte housed them, that East Carolina team. So I look at this Liberty schedule, and I'm saying to myself, what the fuck have you done? Nothing. They really haven't. They haven't played anybody good. They haven't beaten anybody good. Not a chance. These teams stink. These are some of the worst 4 teams. Well, East Carolina's not that bad, but they've totally underachieved this year. This is one of the worst schedules that I can think of to start your year, undefeated like Liberty has. Campbell, New Mexico State, UTEP, and a way overrated, overhyped ECU team. Are you shitting me? That's your 4-0 resume? I'm not buying this team. In fact, I took a piece of FIU, Connor Mack, in this game. I like Mike McIntyre. I think he's had a very, very tough job here to try to turn around a program that's been absolutely horrific before he got here. And, if you want to poke holes in schedules, I'll give you that. Florida International schedule's not exactly chock full of tough opponents either. Central Michigan and Florida Atlantic and Monmouth and Louisiana Tech in their last 4 games. But they did face Indiana, first game of the year. Very good Indiana team. And they lost 31-7, but they covered the number in defeat. The key for Florida International is, can the run defense be good enough? I like Kewan Jenkins. I think he's improving at the quarterback spot for this team, slowly but surely. He's cut down on his interceptions. His completion rate compared to last year has gone up. So those are all positives for FIU going into this game. But the big question is going to be, if you're going to hang in there and stay inside this number, C-Mac, it's the run defense. Because if you're not going to stop the run, you're going to have a very tough time against Liberty. And unfortunately for FIU, I don't love the numbers against the runs that I'm seeing here for them. You look at so far this year, they've given up 4.7 yards per carry, 186 rushing yards per game on the ground. So it's not great by any stretch of the imagination, what we've seen from that Florida International run defense. That is my concern here. But telling you what, you look at Liberty and the East Carolina game, they were a single-digit favorite. This is still a Liberty team this year as a double-digit favorite, which they are here in this game, 0-3 against the spread this year. So clearly they've been a little bit overvalued. So, I don't think the matchup is the absolute best one for the Panthers in this game, the Golden Panthers of FIU, but I'm still taking the points here with FIU in this game. Again, Liberty has got one of the softest, most cream puff 4-0 starts that you will ever see to a college football season. Campbell, UTEP, New Mexico State, those 3 are awful. And even the East Carolina win, there's some shine off that win because of how East Carolina just got blown out and whipped by Charlotte over the weekend. So, and Charlotte's not been a very good team until they played East Carolina. So I'm leaning FIU here. Not just lean. I did grab a small piece of FIU plus the points. C-Mac, what do you think here? FIU Liberty.
Yeah, I mean, is this like after the bye? Is this when Liberty's just going to all of a sudden wake up? I mean,
don't forget how bad they were in the first half against East Carolina. It wasn't until the second half of that game they got going. They were down at halftime.
Dude, some of these games, to see, their defense is just not there. To let even Campbell score 24, New Mexico State 24. UTEP's just so bad. I mean, they can't score more than 10 points, Havana. So, yeah, it's tough for me. They still have the offense. That's what I circled. You hit on it, was FIU's the run defense, though. That's one thing Liberty should be able to do. They gave up 186. They haven't been very good for a couple of years now. They should be able to run it. And I've seen enough of Jenkins. He's been pretty clean, though. He hasn't been awful. Even that last game, that cover they had against La Tech, 17-10. If he does that and we get kind of this defense that I don't love this FIU defense too much either. But I could only take FIU. I'm not going to just lay it here all of a sudden with Liberty. And maybe they show up and shine out. But it seems like, they've been just cakewalking through that easy schedule and these easy wins so far. They come to play. Maybe they win by 4 touchdowns. I got to see some of it to believe it.
Don't forget about Liberty. This is actually a double bye week for them. They had their game canceled against App State last week because of the hurricane. So Hurricane Helene. And by the way, there's another one apparently roaring through Florida, and Hurricane Milton, I think is the name of it. We wish everyone well down there. It's doesn't sound good at this point in time for the folks in Florida. So Godspeed and stay safe. But I'll tell you what, Florida International, Liberty didn't play last week. They have not played since September the 24th. September 21st, that game. So it's really, they've gone, I'm just I'm just looking at it here. They have gone, it'll be 2 full weeks since they have played here. No, actually, sorry. It'll be, a little over 2 weeks since they have played a game. So does rust maybe creep in a little bit? At this time of year, you're not used to going that long without playing, if you're Liberty. Meanwhile, Florida International did play last week, September the 28th against Louisiana Tech. What I might do is I've already taken Florida International full game. I might add a little first half with Florida International. Maybe especially out of the gate, Liberty is a little bit, because remember, they haven't played now since September 21st because that game against App State got canceled, got postponed. So from that standpoint, Connor, is Liberty maybe not quite sharp and on their game early in this one? Something to factor in, something to watch for.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think so. So that's definitely something. If you're watching that game Tuesday night, it's definitely one of those deals where watch early to see how sharp Liberty is. Because, again, teams aren't used to this many days between games at this stage of the season. All right, next up, Wednesday, New Mexico State, Jacksonville State. We've got Jacksonville State, 20.5-point home favorites, 57.5 the total in this game. We talked a little bit last week, C-Mac, about how Jacksonville State's kind of been disappointing this year. But certainly the last 2 games, they've gotten their act together. After losing to Coastal and getting blown out in their season opener at home. They get whipped by Louisville. They lose on the road at Eastern Michigan. But boy, oh boy, have they turned things around. And certainly offensively they have in the last 2 games. We think of this Rich Rod offense, up-tempo, spread, run-first offense, and how they can quickly put up points. They play at one of the fastest paces and tempos in college football. And we're certainly seeing signs of that the last few games. And really, I think what we're seeing is twofold. Tyler Huff is really becoming a weapon at quarterback for Jacksonville State. Tyler Huff is throwing the ball better, and more importantly, he's running the football extremely well. He's already got 445 rushing yards in 5 games this season running the football from the quarterback spot. So again, he's a great fit for this offense. You can see why he's starting, because Rich Rod wants it to be run first. He wants quarterback runs. He wants the RPO game as part of this offensive system for it to be at its best. And I think Tyler Huff is starting to figure it out. And we've seen this offense just absolutely light it up. Even the Eastern Michigan game, we saw signs of this offense starting to get going. 34, 44, and 63 points. Now, the last 2 games are against absolutely sorry opponents, right? Southern Miss and Kennesaw State. So we can't go overly overboard with the praise and overboard with how impressed we are with Jacksonville State. But the problem is, I don't know how much better New Mexico State is. They did get a point spread cover against Liberty at home, 30-24. It was the one game where they looked pretty solid, but they're 1-4 against the spread on the year. They didn't cover a number outside of that. And as a dog, you would think that this team might be a team you could back getting all these points, but 48-0 loss at Fresno, failed to cover as 20-point dogs. 31-11 loss against Sam Houston State on the road. They failed to cover as 15-point dogs. And then a 50-40 loss to New Mexico in the in-state rivalry game in their last game. Santino Marucci is not exactly a quarterback that is impressing me at the moment this year. 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 47.5% completion rate. That's horrific. You're not even completing 50% of your passes. So that's a problem right now for New Mexico State. Quite honestly, it's probably one of the biggest downgrades at the quarterback spot from one year to the next in all of college football this year, New Mexico State. When you go from Diego Pavia to this guy, Santino Marucci, and his 47% completion rate. So that's not what you want to see. I'm not a big Tony Sanchez guy. You know that. I thought he obviously didn't do what Barry Odom's doing right now at UNLV when he was there. Jacksonville State's starting to show signs of it, and they've shown they could absolutely whip on bad teams the last 2 games. What's to stop them from whipping on another? I would honestly lean to JSU here. Jacksonville State, maybe a team total over on Jacksonville State if you're not comfortable laying the 20.5, but this could be another game where they just pile on the points here because that offense is starting to really hit their stride and find their confidence the last few weeks. Not to mention we've got a New Mexico State defense. How bad are they against the run, which is what Jacksonville State looks to do offensively the most? How about 133, just about dead last in run defense, 242.6 rushing yards per game allowed by this New Mexico State run defense. Horrific. And it's not what you want to see when you're playing a team like Jacksonville State. C-Mac, what do you think here? New Mexico State, Jacksonville State.
Yeah, we'll see how the weather is, because I think both these teams can score. And I think if you do like Jacksonville State, I would not lay it. I would take their team total. Just go that route, because both teams should be able to run it. Even New Mexico State last week, they gave up 330 to New Mexico, but they had almost 290. And if they can do that, because Marucci, the quarterback, he's not very good. I mean, he's 13 of 29 last week. He didn't have a pick.
He should be serving bottles of wine at an Italian restaurant, not playing quarterback right now.
Yeah, but maybe that's in his future. But right now, he's playing quarterback for New Mexico State. But I have to say one thing, Vano. This defense for Jacksonville State is not good. For a team like Kennesaw State, who hadn't scored more than 17 points in 8 months or whatever, and for them to get 24, they ranked 120th overall. They haven't been good against the pass or the run, really, Jacksonville State. I thought this was a team bringing back 7 or 8 guys on defense, blah, blah, blah. That defense just isn't there. We know they want to play quick. I lean over in this game, too. I think there's just points there, but I just don't want to lay it. And I don't know in the end if I really want to grab, maybe it's over 3 touchdowns with New Mexico State. I'm not so sure. I just think we get points in this one.
Yeah, you're right about Jacksonville State's defense. It's been leaky at times. Can New Mexico State, do enough offensively? I would say, if
they can, here it is. I think, I think so.
It's possible. We'll see if they can do. I'll say this of the New Mexico State game. The New Mexico game, they did put up 40 in that game against New Mexico. It was all the run game though, and actually, to be honest with you, if you look at it for New Mexico State. They did have some offensive success, but a lot of it was shorter fields. They still only ended up having 400 yards. A lot of it was on the ground, though. The ground game really had a lot of success for New Mexico State in that game. Can it have success here against Jacksonville State is the question, because you look at Jacksonville State, their run defense, to be honest, 4.3 yards per carry. That's not great. It's not terrible, but it's not great. 196.4 rushing yards per game allowed. They have to be able to run the football in New Mexico State, so maybe they can run it on. Both teams might be able to run it on each other, because Jacksonville State's defense is mediocre. It's maybe slightly below average, which isn't great. And New Mexico State's run defense is pathetic. I mean, the numbers for New Mexico State's run defense are dreadful. So that's why it's hard to envision Jacksonville State not having offensive success here in this game. I mean, they're giving up 233 rushing yards per game, 5.7 yards per carry, almost 6 yards per every rush attempt being allowed by this New Mexico State team. That's not going to cut it against this team. That's a very big worry. All right, Thursday night, we have another group of 5 conference game. This time we go to the Sun Belt. Coastal Carolina and James Madison. We have JMU 9.5-point home favorites, 62 being the total in this game. How about, we didn't talk about it early, but it was a match. It was an upset worth talking about. How about ULM? How about the Warhawks? UL Monroe rising up and taking down James Madison 21-19 on Saturday. Very solid win for Bryant Vincent, man. People are sleeping on that, on him as a head coach. It was a great under the radar coaching hire by UL Monroe to get Bryant Vincent. This is the guy that got screwed at UAB. He should have been the head coach, not that oaf, Trent Dilfer. And we see that program just absolutely going down the shithole right now with him at the helm. That job should have went to Bryant Vincent because the kids wanted him. He took over after Bill Clark retired at UAB, and they played great down the stretch. They loved playing for the guy, and UAB's numbnuts AD department, AD and the whole department said, nope, sorry, you're out. And they brought in Trent Dilfer. Terrible. He should have been the guy, but now he's at ULM, and that was a great win for ULM. It was a bad loss, though, for James Madison. I mean, 17-point favorites. We're talking about a JMU team that, just came off a 70-50 win against North Carolina, and then a 63-7 beat down of Ball State. And then you go to ULM, and you struggled. Their quarterback, Alonzo Barnett, struggled in that game, probably his worst game at the quarterback spot. Only 20 of 47, 251 yards, sub 50% completions. Not that efficient at all. Trouble running the football, only 148 rushing yards, and it took 34 attempts to get those 148 rushing yards against ULM's defense. ULM's got a defense, man. That's what we're finding out about them. And James Madison found that out as their offense struggled, stuck in mud most of that game. An offense that's been putting up 60s and 70s in some other games this year. So it's a bounce back spot now for James Madison, coming off that very disappointing loss as double-digit road favorites at ULM. Kind of feels like a good spot to back them. But, you give this Coastal team 9.5 point favorite, or 9.5 points, I should say, as an underdog. A team that has started the year 4-1 straight up, 3-2 against the spread. They beat Jacksonville State big in their opener. They hammered William and Mary. They beat Temple, although they did struggle a bit, didn't cover in that. They lose to Virginia 43-24. But even in that loss to Virginia, Coastal still gained 302 through the air with their quarterback, Ethan Vasco. So it's going to be interesting to see, can they throw the ball here against this James Madison defense. Again, it's a JMU defense that we've seen at times be somewhat susceptible. We think of the North Carolina game. I don't know. This is a tricky one because back home after a very disheartening loss, would it shock me if James Madison brings their A game and they win and maybe cover? It wouldn't shock me, but you get you get Coastal Carolina in this underdog range. They're getting, 9.5 points. Long term, this has been a solid underdog team. Last year, though, one thing that does concern me about backing Coastal here is at home, they look completely and utterly outclassed by James Madison last year, 56-14. Now, that was the Kurt Signetti, Jordan McLeod, James Madison group. That's not that same group this year. They're definitely not as good as they were last year. And I think maybe that Monroe game might have been a sign that maybe this team is down just a little bit, because it's one thing when you beat North Carolina, a non-conference team. Remember, too, CMAC, you're getting into conference play. All these teams know you. All these teams know you and know your tendencies and where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. And certainly Bryant Vincent and UL Monroe exploited that last week. Now here's another conference opponent. And, I'm not a big Tim Beck fan as a head coach, but again, familiarity. You know what you're going to expect here from James Madison. So I lean Coastal, actually. I know it's a bounce back spot for James Madison, but I do lean Coastal a little bit, especially with them getting almost doubles in this game as an underdog. CMAC, what do you think? Coastal Carolina, James Madison.
Yeah, JMU. I mean, there's some ugly teams maybe that you want to bet on, but yeah, Charlotte, Monroe. I think that Southern Miss, they covered.
I had Monroe too against James Madison. Even though I respected James Madison, I'm liking what I'm seeing from Monroe. I thought they could hang. I didn't think they were going to win, though. My gosh, what a win for, like I said, for Bryant Vincent. Incredible win.
Yeah, huge win. And just it was a flat spot for James Madison. Now they're back home. The last couple of years, like you talked about, different team, different old thing. You hit on it. They just beat down this Coastal squad. I've been a little impressed by they played Virginia and they kind of got beat up in that game. And the Temple game's a little misleading. The only game that didn't go over Babano, and that was 21-3. They just kind of took the second half off. But last week, more points against Old Dominion. So I just think both these teams will have success of moving the football. Now this total's up there a little bit. So I wanted to look at it a little bit more, but I think we get points in this game. And one thing, I think James Madison, they got to come back, a little bit after that loss, and get it together at home. But there's just no way I'm going to back them laying 10. I just can't do it. So we'll see if I can get there with Coastal. Vasco, he's been pretty good. But they made
he's gotten better.
What's his face? Joseph. Yeah, they made Joseph look. He was slinging it. Actually, there's the second stringer for Old Dominion last week. So this Coastal defense just hasn't been there, especially the last couple of weeks. Giving it 43 and 48, even the 20 to Temple. If you kind of think of that. So yeah, I thought we could get some points in this one, and I'm off the side. Lean Coastal right now.
I agree. I think this could be a game. You're right, where we see some points scored in this one. Remember, they're more balanced now under Tim Beck. Jamie Chadwell was there. They were definitely way heavier skewed to the run, Coastal on offense. Now they're more balanced. They definitely throw the ball a lot more than they did
are
before.
throwing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So and I agree with the total move. You're right. And you're not alone because this total was 59.5 at 62 now. So there's been some movement up in the total for sure. Shout out to everyone in the chat before we get to our next game. Ross Pitts, Talk Sports with JT, Gold Jew, Myron Kidd, Rance, Bama Boy, Nasty Nate. Good to see Nasty Nate. Goryan Ninkovsky, Old E, Kongs Clips, who's had a phenomenal first month of the season. Great to see everyone in the chat. All right, Middle Tennessee State and Louisiana Tech. Whew, this is an ugly one. Louisiana Tech, 5-point home favorites, 50 the total. So first of all, Middle Tennessee is not a team that I'm interested in backing. You guys know that. I've faded this team pretty much every game this season. Although finally, for the first time, I did not cash a ticket going against them in their last game against Memphis, as Memphis kind of fucked around and dicked around for most of that game, and they didn't play great. They didn't play inspired right from the beginning. They got off to a very sluggish, very slow start, and they ended up getting a 24-7 win, Memphis, over this Middle Tennessee State team. So maybe it is a sign that the Middle Tennessee's power rating has bottomed out. That now maybe there could be some value betting on them moving forward, especially now that we get into conference play. And I'll say this, CMAC for Middle. Bad hire. I don't like the Derek Mason hire. This program is going in the ditch. All of that, and that's why I've been fading them a lot this year. But you played Ole Miss, Western Kentucky, and Duke 3 in a row, competent teams, Memphis as well. And now you're taking a step down in class now that you're going back into conference play here for Middle Tennessee. So the one thing I'll say about them is they're bad. They're one of the worst teams in the country right now, but they are taking a step down with playing Louisiana Tech after some of the teams they played. So I don't know if I'm on board betting against Middle again. I do lean Louisiana Tech, but I got to admit, I'm not giddy about laying 5 with Louisiana Tech either. That's the problem. You look at Louisiana Tech, Nicholls State, 25-17, 7-point favorite, barely covered there. They did have a 30-20 point spread cover loss against NC State, but that's the game that Grayson McCall got injured for them. They lose outright as favorites against Tulsa, 23-20 at home. Tulsa's proven to be pretty bad, the last few games, so that's not impressive. And then at FIU, they're 2.5-point road favorites. They lose outright 17-10. So that's not exactly a resume that says, wow, I'm really confident laying 5 with Louisiana Tech now, is it? So it's a very, very tricky game for me. Probably a pass. 2 teams that can move the football, especially Middle. Middle can move the football a little bit. Maybe this goes over the total, 50. I know Louisiana Tech's been an under team. Their offense has really struggled. There's no doubt Evan Bullock has been bullocks at times from the quarterback spot for Louisiana Tech. And they haven't been able to run the football consistently throughout the course of the year. You look at those Louisiana Tech run numbers, they're not exactly having they're not having any success running the football. They're averaging 77 rushing yards per game, 2.4 yards per carry, but Middle Tennessee can't stop the run. So what's going to give there? Tricky game, right? I mean, Middle Tennessee has been fading them a lot, but they did cover last week. They did face a tough schedule. And Louisiana Tech's not exactly a team playing well enough that I'm saying, yeah, let's lay 5 with them, even against a bad team. So I don't have anything yet on this game, and I may not once we get there on Thursday with kickoff. CMAC, what do you think here? MTSU, La Tech.
Yeah, I mean, both these teams are just dreadful. They're horrible on their numbers. They're at the bottom. They're at the bottom on the offensive numbers. They're just both aren't very good. So what gives? Does that help us stay under? La Tech a little bit more of an under team. I mean, and like I talked about already with FIU losing to them 17-10. I took them against Nicholls, and they had 5 turnovers in that game, still covered 25-17, and they were only 6.5-point favorites. So I thought I got lucky there, and they covered against NC State. This one's just tough for me. I lean La Tech. Do I really want my money on them here? Basically a touchdown to cover. I guess I do. I just don't know. It's tough to take a team when they don't win football games. Now they have to win the football game and cover it. But man, this team has, they've been dreadful They have one win. That was at Nichols, that game, first week of the season. So, yeah, I lean on Tech here, but I bet this one.
To me, there's not a burning desire here that's saying something, Daryl Turner, but you might be right. I mean, I haven't seen enough of Evan Bullock because Jack Turner was the starter here at Louisiana Tech early in the year, but he's been benched. Sonny Cumbie decided I'm making a change, and he went to Evan Bullock, and he was okay against FIU. And actually, the stats aren't bad for him in that FIU loss, but they didn't finish. They only scored at the end of the day 10 points in that game, Louisiana Tech. So you got to finish drives at the end of the day. I'm not a Vadiato guy. I don't like that guy at all. I think he's not very good. But but to your point there, Daryl, he might be better than Evan Bullock.
Maybe.
Because he actually can move the football at times. It's just he has these stupid, dumb fuck turnovers half the time, Vadiato. That's what gets him in trouble. But he can move the ball at times. I have seen it. So, like I say, that's an ugly game. I don't think I'll be involved with it. All right, the third and final game on Thursday this week, UTEP and Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky 19.5 point home favorites, 58.5 the total. This total's gone up too, and if you watch UTEP's defense last week, you can understand why. That's the performance of the UTEP Miners last week. 41-21 beatdown at the hands of albeit a much improved Sam Houston State team. But that was the scheduling spot of a lifetime gift wrap for you with UTEP having the advantage against Sam Houston. Sam Houston's coming off that huge comeback against Texas State, short week, traveling on the road. UTEP's off a bye, extra time to prepare, and that's the turd that UTEP rolled out there for the national audience on television to see on CBS Sports Network last week. Dreadful. Yeah, Cade McConnell started moving the offense, when the game was already well in hand, when the game was there to be when that game was still up for grabs in the first half. The guy was dog shit in the first half, Cade McConnell. He was terrible. Yeah, he scored a bunch of garbage points in the second half, but I'm telling you what, he was not good at all when the game was still up for grabs and it mattered in the first half. He was not good. He ended up finishing still with not great numbers overall, 15 of 28, 204 through the air. Scotty Walden is just stuck. He doesn't have a good quarterback on his roster right now. It's becoming clear because the person that was in there before struggled, Locklear, and then he goes to Cade McConnell, and Cade McConnell wasn't any good last year, not consistent because he was with this program last year when Dana Dimmel was still the head coach. They've just got all kinds of issues on offense. And Western Kentucky, look, if they're giving up 41 to Sam Houston off a bye week with extra time to prepare, what could Western Kentucky do on offense against them? And I know Western's coming off the 21-20 loss against BC, but they've been a good point spread team, 4-1 against the spread. They've also made a quarterback change. They started the year, Western Kentucky, at quarterback with a different starter, and they changed to Caden Veldkamp. Remember, they started with TJ Finley, the guy that transferred over from Texas State, and he obviously wasn't playing well enough in the eyes of Helton, the head coach, and he made the switch to Caden Veldkamp, and Veldkamp's been the starter the last couple. Remember, Veldkamp is the guy as well, C-Mac. He entered that bowl game. He played in the bowl game last year when they had that epic comeback. Remember, they ruled out Austin Reed, and everyone was betting against Western Kentucky in that bowl game, and Western Kentucky had the huge comeback. Caden Veldkamp was the quarterback that engineered that comeback.
And he's won this job.
Yeah.
I mean,
he has.
Since he's come in.
Bottom line is, look, if you tap off a bye week, okay, this with extra time to prepare, gave up 41 on defense. What's to stop Western Kentucky from rolling it up offensively against them at this point? So I understand why Western's taking money. It's hard to back UTEP right now. It just really, truly is. And, if Western Kentucky can hit the 40s, the one thing I'll say, Western Kentucky can be at times susceptible on defense. Maybe McConnell and UTEP can hit 20, because that's what happened for me last week. I had Sam Houston and UTEP over 50, and they got to 62 points in that game, and it's because we got enough from the opponent, or we got enough from UTEP offensively to get that game over the total. So I think maybe something like that could happen again, something like 40 to 24, 41 to 24, something like that. And this game, or 41-20, if Western Kentucky covers. that could be a final score, and it goes over this 57. Well, it was 57. It's 58.5. So it's been moving, this total, and hard to disagree with the way UTEP defensively looked last week. CMAC, what do you think here? UTEP, Western Kentucky.
We'll see. That was the first time all year that game got, for UTEP got over, because like the defense is bad, but it's been dreadful. Like even we mentioned Liberty early 28, Colorado State's who's down this year 27. And on the flip side, UTEP can't score. Like if they get to the 20 in there, I think you're right. But I don't know if that can happen. Even this Western Kentucky team has been pretty good. We know their defense always isn't the tops, usually year in and year out. But the quarterback change was good. Last week, Feldenkemp, he had 2 picks, but they were right in that game.
That was BC on the road, though, so I'll forgive him for that. Yeah.
Yeah, but still, they covered that. This was big. Like I was hoping this was not almost year 20. Like, you know what I mean? But UTEP's been that bad. I thought it'd be more like 14. But they've just been that dreadful, and you can't back them. So it's tough for me to lay this many now with Western Kentucky. Maybe their team total just gets there in the end. They could seem like they could do what they want. And UTEP, they can't stop the run game. They just can't stop it. So Western Kentucky, maybe this week hand it off a little bit more, because UTEP against the pass, not horrible. I think they gave up a little less than 200. So yeah, tough one. Maybe look Western Kentucky team total. I think that'd be maybe the safest in this game.
Great question from Slippery Rock. With this new hurricane, Milton approaching, any of these games in jeopardy of bad weather? So Milton apparently is heading to Tampa Bay area, and it's supposed to be late Wednesday and into Thursday. So to me, I think the majority of the bad weather, the worst of it with this hurricane, is going to be gone by Saturday when these games take place. So I think the Saturday games will be fine. The game that you may have to worry about being postponed or canceled is Memphis, South Florida on Friday night, because where is South Florida? Oh yeah, Tampa. They play in the same stadium, Raymond James Stadium, as the Buccaneers of the NFL. So that's the game that's in jeopardy, Slippery Rock, in my opinion. Memphis, USF, Friday night.
And kind of what happens with these hurricanes once they hit, like the last one lingered long and went through the Carolinas, and where does this veer off and maybe go? I mean, it looks like it's heading kind of the same as the last one. So
Carolina,
check
Tennessee,
it. Be on hurricane watch. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, check it.
Yeah, definitely.
It's too early, because the thing is, it's hard to pinpoint on a Monday where it's going to go. The exact trajectory, it can change with all these weather patterns and low pressure systems, and in this case, hurricanes. So from that standpoint, it's definitely, we'll know more later in the week. But as of right now, I would say Memphis, South Florida is the game on the schedule that could be affected by a Hurricane Milton. And great segue, because that's next up on our list of games. Friday night, Memphis and South Florida. Again, this would be the game where I'd be a little leery about actually going ahead and taking place. So keep that in mind. But we will handicap it as if it's going to happen Friday night at 7 p.m. Eastern time. Memphis, 7-point road favorites, 59.5 the total in this game. The betting markets are really starting to crash hard on South Florida, as in, they've not liked what they've seen from South Florida in a couple of their recent games. And I get it. Tulane and Miami, they got absolutely drilled. They got absolutely pounded in those 2 games. South Florida, 50-15 loss to Miami, 45-10 loss to Tulane. But Miami, we know how great they are on offense. No question, with Cam Ward and company, and how explosive they are. Even though it's bad, you give up 50 points. We know that's a heck of an offense. And then you give up 45 points to a Tulane team that, you know what? I actually think they're still scoring on UAB and that sorry-ass Trent Dilfer-led football team right now. I still think so. I think they just punched in another touchdown right now, UAB. I think they're getting close to that 80 mark now against UAB as we speak. God, that's terrible for UAB. That's another story. But look,
that's awful.
I said this coming into the season about Tulane. John Sumrall is the poster child for why we don't just assume coming into the year, okay, they lost a lot of players from last year. They lost their head coach, who was a very good one, in Willie Fritz. Let's bet against this team this season. No, you don't do that. especially when you bring in an excellent head coach who knows what he's doing, who gets the team prepared, who gets them ready for every game, who always has a strong game plan to dissect the opponent on a weekly basis. And that's John Sumrall, who they hired from Troy, who's done a phenomenal job with Tulane. So that's a reminder when it comes to handicapping college football. Don't just bet against teams because they have a new head coach. Head coach is worth a damn, and he knows what he's doing. They can have success in year one. So that's a big factor. Anyway, getting back to South Florida, yeah, bad against Miami and Tulane, non-competitive. But you have to remember how great Miami's offense is, and Tulane's been just absolutely terrific. Like I said, they're probably if there was no time limit and they could keep playing from Saturday to Monday, Tulane versus UAB, Tulane would still be putting up touchdowns right now against that sorry ass UAB football team. So as far as I'm concerned, you've got to take it with a grain of salt that South Florida was horrible in the last two games and factor in, well, they played Miami, who's a great offense, and they played a Tulane team that's a lot better than people think. You can tell I'm leaning South Florida here because I just don't trust Memphis fully as a touchdown road favorite. There's a Memphis team that lost outright as a 9-point road favorite to Navy just a few weeks ago and gave up 56 points. Just when we think Memphis has one of the better defenses they've had in years, they give up 56, can't stop the triple option, albeit that Navy team's looking pretty good this year with Blake Horvath leading it this year. That they got that wing T, and they've got this hybrid fusion offensive system. They're picking up pieces of offensive systems from various systems and blending it into one, and they're having success, Navy, and Memphis couldn't stop them. And even last week against a downtrodden, bottom feeder Middle Tennessee team, 27-point favorites, they never sniffed a point spread cover. They were asleep for most of that game. It was pathetic how Memphis played, especially in the first half. They should have drilled that team. They should have put them away, especially after losing to Navy the way they did. And that's how you come out against Middle Tennessee, sleepwalk through most of them. They're just not well coached, C-Mac. I've said this a million. I'm not a Ryan Silverfield guy. This guy has not kept the program at the heights Mike Norvell had it before he left Memphis for South Florida, for Florida State. So this is definitely I'm not laying 7. I know the betting markets think South Florida is a piece of crap because of the way they played the last 2 weeks against Miami and Tulane, but they still do have an offense with Byron Brown that can be very explosive. The offense hasn't clicked. I can't explain why the offense has been so bad. This was not supposed to be an issue with South Florida, and that does concern me because Miami's defense got hit a little bit by Cal over the weekend. Why couldn't South Florida, move the football? And keep an eye too. Byron Brown left that Tulane game with an injury and didn't return. Bryce Archie took over, and Byron Brown's questionable for this game. So if he doesn't go, we might once again be seeing Bryce Archie at the quarterback spot, and that could be a significant downgrade because Bryce Archie in that Tulane game after Brown got hurt, 4 for 10, 41 yards. Horrible. No passing game, no downfield vertical attack at all for South Florida with Bryce Archie after Byron Brown left that game against Tulane. So keep that in mind. I still lean South Florida. I don't trust this coach, and I don't trust this Memphis team as a full touchdown road favorite at this point. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, I got to wait with the quarterback. I don't know if I want to go there with
I'm with you there.
With Archie. Yeah, this is just a wait for me. But I think the South Florida team, they're still bad. They're Spain. But they play a Tulane team that's pretty good this year. I've seen them play enough. And Miami, who is still undefeated, and has a really good offense. So, and it showed the South Florida defense, is still leaky. But I think they're the side in this one. I think this is where I want them when they're kind of just got tossed off. And I always love fading Memphis as a favorite. Do you know what I mean? Earlier in the year, they covered obviously Florida State. That was that big game. We know what's happened with Florida State. And then Navy just runs all over them the next week. So what do we get? Like the stats say, the defense has been pretty good for Memphis. But just not a team on the road that I want to lay. Both these teams too, it's been a little bit high, their totals. So this, wait for maybe the weather. This is at 59, but 1-4 and 1-3 for South Florida. Some of these totals just maybe have been a little bit high and they haven't got there in the end. So I don't think I messed with that. I think I just looked to South Florida. I will wait later in the week on this one.
Yeah, I'm with you too, though. I would much prefer Brown at quarterback. Hopefully he is this week for South Florida. Keep in mind, Memphis's run defense numbers, by the way, for the full season, they're lying. It's going to look like they're pretty good against the run. Their full season numbers are 3.9 yards per carry allowed. Memphis, the run defense.
Some of those teams didn't run, though, like Florida State, some of those games. Yeah, exactly.
119 rushing yards per game allowed. You know who you played? You played North Alabama, Troy, who's been an offensive disaster this year, Florida State in the toilet offensively, and Middle Tennessee, who's a terrible football team. The one good rush team you played was Navy, and you know what Navy did? 361 rushing yards against Memphis. It's skewed from weak offenses and teams that don't or can't run the football. That's how they feasted the Memphis numbers against the run.
And what in the end here? Seth Hennigan. Like, just been there forever, decent quarterback, but not great. I mean, last week against Middle Tennessee, 26 to 41, 227, no TDs, no picks, but just like the serviceable guy.
That's pedestrian. Yeah, I agree. Yeah. That's pedestrian performance. Simple as that. All right, Northwestern and Maryland. You should be putting up 500 yards and 3 touchdowns at minimum against that Middle Tennessee State team, and he didn't do that. Seth Hennigan in that game. All right, Northwestern and Maryland, another Big Ten Friday night college football Fox national TV game coming up here. Maryland 10-point home favorites, 45 the total in this game. I'm going to be stubborn with Northwestern because I do feel that this team this is where you want it. This is the point spread range you want Northwestern. If you're going to back Northwestern, this is when you're going to do it. Is when they're getting double digits. Now, I know the last 2 times they've been double-digit underdogs. They failed to cover at Washington 24-5. But look, that's a Washington team that just had a nice, impressive win against Michigan. They played better in the loss against Rutgers on the road than you would think. They probably should have won that game. And then you look at Indiana, 41-24. I was impressed with Northwestern. Indiana's damn good, and they hung around for a majority of that game. Now, Curtis Rourke did what he did to a lot of teams against Northwestern, ripped them up through the air. But I was impressed with Jack Losh. Jack Losh was definitely improved from he was terrible against Washington on the road, but I thought he was a lot better against Indiana. 243 through the air, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions. That's what you like to see. They still haven't been able to run the football. 93 rushing yards against Indiana, so that's going to have to improve. But you do look at this Maryland defense. Their run defense has been good. Their pass defense has been ripped. So maybe Jack Losh can have some success through the air here against this Maryland defense. Maryland, meanwhile, on the offensive side, in spite of losing Talia Tagovailoa, we've seen some good results from them. They're also off a bye week, worth noting. They haven't played since they lost Indiana. So both of these teams are coming off losses to the Indiana Hoosiers. But Billy Edwards has been very good throwing the ball. Roman Hemby, a very good running back for Maryland as well. You look at this Northwestern team, though, the defense is really what's kept this Northwestern team afloat. They're only giving up 93 rushing yards per game, 3.1 yards per carry. Now, their pass defense has been the shaky part. So it kind of feels like 2 teams that should be able to throw on the other team, but whoever's going to be able to run better against the other team is probably going to win and cover this game, because that's where the concerns are. Maryland and Northwestern defensively are both better against the run. The problem is, I think Maryland's got a little bit better running back than Northwestern does with Hemby. But Maryland off a bye is a good thing for them. I still don't fully like the idea of laying doubles with this team and this coach and Loxley necessarily, but I lean Northwestern. I don't know. I'm on the fence, though, because I'll admit Northwestern has failed to cover as double-digit dogs. I'm not sold the matchup's going to work for them. Maryland's at home on a Friday night, College Park. Place will be probably bumping a little bit more than you would normally have for a game against Northwestern. So it's a mild lean to Northwestern, but I don't know if I'm going to end up getting involved or moving ahead with a bet on it. What do you think here, C-Mac?
That's why I can't get involved, Savannah. This isn't we're old enough to know. It's been the last, 3 years or so. Northwestern as a dog just has it covered, where it was just, you took them, especially at home. It just was just money.
Last year down the stretch they were, but not this year so far. Yeah.
They did, but still. Now this is on the road, been a little bit different, but it's tough to watch them because the offense just hasn't been very good. And they're 1-4 ATS. They haven't covered anything, so that doesn't make me want them here. I didn't think this was enough points. Maryland, you mentioned off the bye. Edwards looked pretty good, I thought. He had what, like 350 in that game. He was slinging around. If he takes care of the ball, I think Maryland wins here. But man, I really don't want to lay 10. This is a pass for me.
All right, UNLV and Utah State. UNLV 19-point road favorite, 64.5 the total. This is also on Friday night. Look, normally I don't like betting against teams coming off their first loss of the season, which obviously because it's sometimes a bubble burst, right? Even I know it's the NFL, but look at Seattle yesterday against the New York Giants, where they lost their first game against Detroit, Monday Night Football last week, and you could tell right away Seattle didn't have it. Seattle didn't have it yesterday. And sometimes when you lose that first game, it takes a week to get it out of your system. So I guess that's the one fear you'd have if you're going to back UNLV here, coming off that tough loss in overtime against Syracuse. Look, I get it, right? Some of the calls that went against UNLV, especially late, were dubious. I get it. But at the same time, you can't give up 44 points and you can't give up all those passing yards to Kyle McCord like they did. You can't give up 355 passing yards and expect to win. So I get bitching about the refs a little bit, but let's not say we lost because of the refs. No, you lost because the secondary got flamed and torched in that game by Kyle McCord. But I think right now you've got the opportunity to bounce back here. And if there's a coach I'm ready to trust to have his team refocused, like if you're UNLV, no woe is me. They can't be down in the dumps. Everything is still ahead of you. That was not a Mountain West Conference game either that you lost to Syracuse. You're already 1-0 in conference play from the win against Fresno. So there's no need to be, in a down mood or a sad mood and feel sorry for yourself. And if there's one coach that I trust to not have his team feeling sorry for themselves after last week, it's Barry Odom, to have his team pumped up again, ready to rock. It's conference play Friday night. Let's get the job done. Let's bounce back. Let's play UNLV football the way we're capable of. And I think you're going to see UNLV respond the right way here. With Haj Malik Williams has been great. He's better throwing the ball than Sluka, by the way. Like I say, don't hit your door. Don't hit your ass with the door on the way out, kind of thing. With him, they don't miss him in the slightest. That he can throw and he can run too, and he's shown that. He's been great. Now the defense was the issue last week. But is Utah State's offense capable of doing anything about it? I'll say this. They scored 29 and 30 the last two against Temple and Boise. But with Spencer Petras, the Iowa transfer, who is experienced, I still don't think he's that great, though, at the quarterback spot. More than anything. Flashes. Yeah. But also, one thing I do know about Utah State, this is one of the worst defenses in college football right now. 48 to USC, 38 to Utah, 38 to Utah, and Cam Rising didn't even fucking play in that game. It was little Zach Wilson, Isaac Wilson, little brother of Zach, who hasn't really been that good. And somehow they put 38 against Utah State with Isaac Wilson at quarterback. 45 allowed to Temple, and then 62 to Boise last week. You want to know how bad Utah State's defense is, especially against the run? Look at these run defense numbers for Utah State. They're giving up 217.8 rushing yards per game, 5.6 yards per carry. That's death against UNLV because UNLV wants to run the football. They want the run game to be part of that offense. I mean, that is just a matchup nightmare waiting to happen for Utah State's defense here in this game. You want to know how bad it is, C-Mac? Ashton Genty, I think he cashed his rushing prop at halftime. 186 rushing yards, and they didn't even play him a snap in the second half because it was a blowout. It was it was over at halftime. Boise was up 42-7 or something at halftime. It was over. They didn't play Ashton Genty a snap, a single play in the second half, and he still had 186 rushing yards last week against this Utah State defense. Just absolutely hilarious stuff. What was that score? It was 49-17 at halftime for Boise State last week.
I took him. I laid the minus 16. You couldn't win team total.
Cashed at halftime.
There you go.
It cashed at halftime. Yeah, for me, look, this is UNLV or pass. UNLV first half, maybe. UNLV full
team
game.
Total.
UNLV team total over is probably what I like the most because I'll say this about the Syracuse game, C-Mac. I had the full game over, but I did take UNLV. Didn't lay the points with them, which was a good thing, but I did take UNLV team total over 31.5. in that game, and it cashed. They scored obviously in the loss, even despite losing 41 points. So the team, and I love those games where the team total over cashes, even if that team doesn't cover the point spread. But if you ask me, I do think UNLV is probably covering the point spread here. I just like the team total over even more. I lean to the full game over too, because this could be like Boise where UNLV gets 45, 48, and all you need is like 20, 21 out of Utah State with Petrus, and they can go over the total. I would look at anything like that, any of those combos, any of those bets in this game in some form, CMAC. UNLV first half, UNLV full game, UNLV team total over, and a full game over here. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I think UNLV team total is the way to go. Even first half, the numbers, just Utah State, the bottom of the barrel here. They're back against the pass and the run. They're just right there, almost dead last in the country. UNLV in that game, I talked about, and you did too, the secondary. They hadn't really played anybody, and a quarterback could throw it. McCord did. They dominated time of possession. I know there were bad calls in that game, but Syracuse almost 40 minutes to UNLV's 20.
Yeah.
And UNLV was sloppy. 9 penalties for 108 yards. Man, it just wasn't they didn't look locked in, but they should be able to just run it, kind of score at will against this Utah State team. And yeah, maybe Utah State could pitch in, but I think you just stick to UNLV team total. That was kind of the easy rocky chair winner with Boise last week.
Yeah, no kidding. Ashton Genty, I mean, just an unbelievable season he's having. And Utah State, again, the run defense is not very good. UNLV should be able to run it. I do like the UNLV secondary still. I mean, Catalan's getting all the praise.
Yeah, they just hadn't faced a passing attack
that
right. Great yet, I think. Yeah. And it showed a little bit with McCord and some of those receivers for Syracuse. But, down the line, I still think the defense gets after it, especially if they get turnovers. They'll be
their D-line is pretty solid, pretty formidable. Mm-hmm. But you're right, the secondary's been great, but again, they faced, finally an pass offense that was going to test them, and it showed last week against Syracuse. All right, Utah and Arizona State, a little Friday night Pac-12 action. We've got Utah 6.5-point road favorites, 45 the total in this game. A lot of money coming in on Utah. This goes all the way from 3 up to 6.5, and you've got to believe the reason for the move is that Cam Rising might make an appearance here in this game for Utah.
Don't hold your breath.
Game time decision is the latest we're hearing on Cam Rising's status. It'll be pushed to game day. They say it's going to be a game time decision. If not, it'll be Isaac Wilson, Zach Wilson's little bro, one more time at quarterback if Cam Rising can't go. And this is one of the bigger downgrades from one quarterback to the second, from QB1 to QB2. This is a pretty big downgrade for Utah. So it's very important who starts for them, whether it's Rising or it's Isaac Wilson in this game. They're betting Utah as if they know Rising's in there. Either that or they think Utah is undervalued and Arizona State's overvalued. What I'll say is if it's Isaac Wilson at quarterback and this number is where it is right now, I'll be interested in the forks up, man. Honestly, Arizona State. I love the guts of this team, the heart, the fight, and they needed every ounce of it in that back and forth affair with Kansas on Saturday night. They kept giving up the lead and they kept responding, whether it was Scadaboo running it. And what a performance by Sam Levitt, the Michigan State transfer at quarterback. He was terrific in that game and just responded every time Kansas moved the football and scored against Arizona State. And for someone that had Arizona State money line in that game, was very happy to see just how Arizona State always answered back after Kansas scored. And for Kansas, it's just another game where they found a way to lose in the fourth quarter and blew a lead. And it's happened multiple times for them this year. I'm sure Lance Leipold beyond frustrated with the lack of finish and late game execution from his team this year. And it's been bad. But Arizona State, man, certainly one of the more improved teams in college football. They are. I mean, they've certainly played better than people thought. They finally got a quarterback. They got a very good offense. Defense is still a little shaky. But again, if it's Isaac Wilson at quarterback, can they exploit that? There is a gap defensively. I get it. Utah's definitely a better defensive team than Arizona State. I totally get it because we've seen Arizona State. They Kansas did move the ball against them. So did Texas State. Even Mississippi State did at times, and so did Texas Tech. But with Isaac Wilson at quarterback, let's assume it's him. No freaking way am I laying, 6.5 with Utah on the road in this game. But again, this is one of those games we got to wait to see who's under center for the Utes. C-Mac, what do you think?
Just shout out to all you guys, Old E, Al, Tom Leach, what up, my man? That was a gutsy win by Arizona State, and bunch of points late there, but man, the game got over. We talked about it last week. I thought the total was a little bit low.
Yep. Good call.
And it got over. There, Scatterboo, he had a great game too. Kind of a bust-out game, 186 yards. I think their defense is all right, though, Arizona State. Utah's got to be the extra time, Rising, God. But with him in and out, it's like, at this point, I was like, all right, I got to keep the noise out until,
extra time to prepare for Whittingham. Yes, I didn't mention that. Good on you for mentioning that. Utah off a bye. Yep. Yeah,
extra time. And they couldn't get anything going, which I'd not like to see at home, even with Wilson there against Arizona, because we saw Arizona, this defense, I think it's just kind of average. And we've seen them give up points. So that's a little bit, but I couldn't go here. I mean, especially if Wilson's in, I think this is all right spot. Utah could go in there and win, but more than the touchdown, I can't. And I liked Arizona State all year. The only game I didn't like was the Texas Tech game where they went there. That was the only one where I kind of didn't want them at all. So I agree with you. This total's low. I lean under, but it's at 45. I think it's about right, especially if Wilson's in. Can he put up points? It is that offense is definitely tough watching when he's in there. You know what I mean?
That lost to Arizona, he was borderline inept in that football game.
Yeah, I watched the whole. Yeah, it was not good at home
for all those years with the Jets again. Yeah.
I know, but to see him at Salt Lake is just not put up anything up against Arizona, not even make a move in that game. Like they, drive and score some points. It just never happened, especially in the second half.
No doubt. It was an alarming offensive performance. Not the kind of offensive performance I'm trusting if Wilson's going to be the quarterback laying this kind of number on the road. All right, let's turn to Saturday. We're finally at Saturday's games. There's just a slew of weeknight games, but finally we move on to Saturday now. Iowa State, West Virginia in the Big 12. Iowa State, 3-point road favorites, 51 the total here in this game. West Virginia, I'm leaning West Virginia here, I'll be honest. There's a Saturday night game in Morgantown. They finally got off, look, there's some real worry about Oklahoma State. They look like some semblance of quit from Mike Gundy's team Saturday against West Virginia. That was not a good sign, I think, for Oklahoma State. But let's not take it away from West Virginia. They played well in that game against Oklahoma State, got the job done easily, wire to wire. They were just a better football team, start to finish on Saturday against Oklahoma State. I like Garrett Green quite a bit, the quarterback. It's all about the defense for West Virginia. That's been the area where they've been a little bit weaker, not nearly as good this season. That was absolutely one of their better defensive efforts, though, holding Oklahoma State to 14 points. And now they've got some momentum, right? They had the loss to Penn State. They had that frustrating loss to Pitt where they should have won that game. Really, this team should be 4-1 right now. They shouldn't have lost that Pitt game. They were up by like 2 scores late, and then Pittsburgh, bang, bang, 2 touchdowns, comes back and wins 38-34. But what happened to them against Pitt, they turned the tables on Kansas because Kansas lost a game to West Virginia in very similar fashion, and West Virginia came back late 30. And then they have that great dominant effort against Oklahoma State. So Neil Brown's team has definitely, I think, kind of righted the ship. It was a huge game on the ground for Jaheim White, 158 rushing yards for him against Oklahoma State last week. We'll see if they can have success here against a very good Iowa State run defense. So they've been actually, they haven't been phenomenal, but they've been okay. 4.2 rushing yards per game, 138 rushing yards per game allowed, 4.2 yards per carry allowed. They are a balanced offense. They're running it pretty well. 223 on the ground for West Virginia, 5.3 yards per carry, 216 through the air. Iowa State's defense is pretty solid. 43-21 win against Baylor for them over the weekend. 4-0 against the spread their last 4 games. They've been a good point spread team. They've even been covering as favorites this year, which hasn't always been the case under Matt Campbell.
Yeah.
But then you look at the opponents, though, right? I mean, they did beat Iowa. We'll give them that. But, Arkansas State, Houston, it was not, they're still going through some things, although they had a great win against TCU and Baylor. See how they fare here on the road against West Virginia. I still like the momentum West Virginia's got right now. It's not easy winning in Morgantown on a Saturday night. So I'm still leaning West Virginia here as a home underdog. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, Iowa State. There's a couple we'll get to. I try to go against the grain. When these two teams just get together, there's points, and there's a shit ton of points again when Baylor played Iowa State. But man, it's just a little bit shocking, but it just happens. And there was a couple of those last week. We can get into Purdue, Wisconsin was another one, and that got easily over. Baylor too was up in this game early, 14-3, and then the defense, they just got gashed, and then it got close again, and Iowa State pulled away, scored 24 points in the last 10 minutes, just like pulled away in a tight game. This isn't easy. This is where I want to back West Virginia, and I'm on them here. I got to take the 3 with Green. I know that they might not have the better defense here. The place should be rocking in this one. That Pittsburgh loss was very good, but watching them beat Kansas and then just beat up on Oklahoma State, which we get to later, man, they have some troubles there. But I like Green. I love this offense. I think they could score some points. After seeing Baylor move the ball with Robertson, I think Green could do it as well. So I'll take the 3 here at home. And what about this total? This is pretty light for West Virginia, who's been regularly going over. Do we get more of a tighter game here? I kind of need to look at that more.
Yeah, that's a good point about, maybe Iowa State not nearly as good defensively as they've been in the past. I know they shut out Houston and they gave up 7 to Arkansas State, but 19 to Iowa, even that doesn't do much for me. They played a little bit more of a better offense. Baylor's terrible defensively, and they showed it again.
Yeah.
Offensively, they can move it a bit, and they did struggle a bit, Iowa State, in that game. And they are 3-2 to the over, Iowa State this year as well. So maybe 51 is a little light with the total. That'll be interesting to see if maybe we're getting a bargain on that total with that one. All right, Cal and Pitt. We got Pittsburgh 3.5-point home favorites, 59.5. The total. Still getting used to the fact Cal and Pitt is an ACC game, but here we are. For Cal, man, this is a tough spot. There's no getting around it. This is a very, very tough spot considering you poured your guts out there Saturday night, college game day in town, in Berkeley, the late night game against Miami, and you've got them beat. You've essentially got them beat. You're up 35-10 at one point in that game, and you end up somehow letting it slip away. Prevent defense, prevents you from winning, prevents you from covering. That's about it. Exactly. Just not aggressive. They were getting after Cam Ward most of that night and just gave him too much time. You give him that much time, and I'm shocked in Justin Wilcox because I know defense is his thing. To have that kind of a game plan, that passive, you pay the price in football these days playing like that and doing that passive shit. You've got to, your pass rush has to be a factor. You have to play aggressively on the opposing receivers. You don't give them 10, 15 yards of cushion down the field. I mean, it's just absolutely ridiculous and absurd to see that from Cal, and they paid the price for it last Saturday night against Miami in that 39-38 loss. Just gut-wrenching, considering it was 38-18 and 35-10 at one point. And then it was 21 unanswered in 10 minutes in the fourth quarter for Miami to turn that game around. Now you got just a kick-in-the-gut loss. Now you got to travel cross-country and play Pitt this week. That's not easy. Pitt, meanwhile, look, I cashed a ticket with Pitt. It was probably equally, if not more, fate of North Carolina. But Pitt got the job done. Eli Holstein continues to play well at quarterback. I mean, this is Pitt or pass for me. I can't touch Cal after that kind of loss. Now you're traveling cross-country. I think this is Pitt minus the points, 3.5, team total over, because I like their offense quite a bit. That's definitely the way I would lean here in that game. And let's be honest with Cal. Defensively, early in the year, they looked pretty good, but was that some of it schedule related? Florida State, no offense. Auburn, weak offense. San Diego State's breaking in a new system. Played by far the best offense they've seen, and they struggled. So maybe an over as well. But specifically for me, this is probably Pitt as a home favorite in this game for me. C-Mac, what do you think?
This is the now the schedule's but with them. Just like now, then they got to go cross, and it's like back home. I mean, it's got to start wearing on them soon. And after that loss,
Let me just quickly say about what you mentioned it wearing on them. The last 4 weeks at Auburn cross country, all the way back home to San Diego State, all the way back to the East again at Florida State, all the way back home for that Miami game, late into the night. You blow it. You have that heartbreaking loss, and now you got to fly all the way to the East again for Pitt. I mean, this may not be a get off the plane or get off the bus game for Cal. That concerns me here.
Yeah. And that just like the game plan was just they get out, the defense was getting afterward, like you talked about, but they didn't hold on the ball too much. Not only the defense, a lot of it is the play call on the offense when you have a lead like that. It just drives me nuts. And it showed in the time of possession. And it was 22 to like 37, I think it was. I'd have to double check that. But it was just awful. Like, wow. So the money line's burned up in flames. Of course, they still covered. It's just tough to go. I know this is 3.5. They're 5-0 and they're 5-0 against the spread. How can I not? Especially you've been betting Pitt, you've been cashing in this one. And I don't know about the total here. Do we get back to having points? Pitt's been able to score. Like I said, it would have been a goose egg nice early morning for me of all wins. And all I needed was a touchdown with 10 minutes left. Nobody got it in that game. So I did love that. Pitt got their team total over. And Pitt didn't give anything up. You give them credit. North Carolina, they didn't score in the fourth when that kind of in crunch time. So here at home, I think they could win again. And maybe it's a game you just take money line. I'm going to go crazy with that. Or get this down to 3. You feel a lot better. This game could be tight.
All right, Vanderbilt and Kentucky, SEC play. Kentucky 14-point home favorites, 46 the total in this game. Here's another we talked about Cal, although they had a brutal loss. Vanderbilt had an unbelievable program-defining win, the biggest win, I would say, in program history. I don't even think it's a debate, beating Alabama as 23-point underdogs on the weekend. Full marks for the win, too. The offense moved the football throughout that game against Alabama. Diego Pavia was outstanding. They were able to run it a bit. And the defense, look, they got gashed at times, no doubt, but they made the key stops when they had to. And when they had the chance to run out the clock and with a first down, they did. They got it done. So not a fraudulent win at all. Vanderbilt outplayed and took it to Alabama and beat them. But you saw the scenes in Nashville on the field. Throughout the downtown core of Music City, they're wheeling the goalposts for crying out loud through the downtown streets of Nashville, Tennessee, following that win. Are you really trusting Vanderbilt? I know, into the river too. I know. My gosh, it was like a parade with the goalposts from the stadium that they took down after that win. Do we really trust Vanderbilt to reel it all back in after the win of a lifetime for the program against Kentucky here? That's the debate. But here's the flip side of that argument. Can we lay 14 with Kentucky's offense and Vandergriff?
Yeah.
I don't know. I get it. Look, and people are betting Kentucky hand over fist. And from a pure spot perspective, I get it. Vanderbilt off that win is not someone I'm ready to trust. But Kentucky's not a double-digit. Let's lay 14 with type of team for me. And Vandy and Pavia in particular, and Vandy as a program, and especially Pavia going back to when he was with New Mexico State, he's just money as an underdog. His quarterback ATS record as an underdog, I would love to know what it is, because it's probably something like 70-80% at least. He's been that good as an underdog as a quarterback. Now, I know this is coming off. There's a huge potential emotional, physical, mental hangover and letdown coming off the big win against Alabama. I totally get it. But Kentucky's not one of those, I feel ultra confident in their offense to lay 14 with type of team. So it's probably a pass for me when it's all said and done on Vandy and Kentucky here. And same with the total. Vandy covers, it goes over because offense is better than their defense. But if Kentucky covers, it's probably going to go under. They're going to get it to their game. They're going to shut down Vandy. They're going to win something like, if they cover, they're going to win something like 28-10 or some shit like that. And it'll stay under the total. So it's a stay off. This is not one of those deals where, like with the Cal game, it's an auto knee-jerk auto bet on the team fading the team in the hangover spot. It's got to make sense from a matchup standpoint. And Kentucky's offense, to me, I'm scared to death to lay 14 with their offense. Their defense is great. We saw what they did against Ole Miss. They're really good defensively, and they could shut down and make life difficult on Pavia and Vanderbilt, but the offense is still sketchy to me, C-Mac, for Mark Stoops' team. What do you think here?
One thing, as good as Kentucky's defense has been, like, Pavia's been able to move the ball and score. Like, even, in the OT game, Missouri last week, yeah, and he's been just great as a dog. And, of course, this year already been money. Yeah, everyone looked, fade him this week. But 2 touch, like, I think if Kentucky does, it's something like that. It's like 28-13, 21-10, like you talked about. Like, but I think we'll see. I wonder, because I think Vandy could move the ball here. And if that happens, because I thought the same thing, like, yeah, I think you just fade him this week. But 2 touchdowns with Pavia, Vandy too. Both these teams have been good against the number, both 4-1. Kentucky leans to the under, 1-4. But Vandy again, just been very, very good to the over. They cash against Bama. So if they score, like you said, this slips over. But if not, this stays under if Kentucky shuts them down. But man, I think it could be trouble containing him. I think I'd look out. Everyone just rushing right now to bet Kentucky, because I even thought that. Like, just fade him, but you got to look into this a little bit more. Do you want Vandergriff, who's looked pretty good? Like, do I trust him at quarterback?
Brock Vandegrift, I don't. Not a 14-point home favorite. I don't.
14 home favorite. They are off a bye here, right? They didn't play last week,
Yep.
Kentucky.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
So they've had time to sit. In some of these games,
I mean, everything about it from a
team.
spot perspective, for Vanderbilt from an anti-standpoint and Kentucky from a pro standpoint, matchup at home off a bye, everything lines up for Kentucky. I totally get that. But
Yeah.
for me, the numbers just I don't feel it at -14.
Just things are different too. It's kind of like Bama.
Yeah.
Vanderbilt never beat them. They just waxed their ass. And kind of Kentucky has beat them up, at least especially at home. I know Vandy beat them a couple years ago, but just different teams here. And with Pavia, just look out. Don't give him a lane to run. This game could be close. Okay.
Should be interesting. That's an interesting game. That's SEC Network, I believe, on Saturday night. So that's a fascinating game. You got Kentucky coming off a bye. That defense, and that defense, you're right, Daryl, was awesome against Ole Miss. And Ole Miss just got back to their good ways offensively against South Carolina last weekend. So that makes that Kentucky defensive effort and the way they played against Georgia even more impressive. That is no joke. You're right about that Kentucky defense. But you still have to put the biscuit in the basket. You've still got to score points if you're going to cover as -14. And that's where the concern has been for Kentucky this season. All right, next up, Syracuse and NC State. The Cuse, 4.5-point road favorites in Raleigh. The total, 54.5. This is one where I'm a little perplexed with the total. We know Syracuse offensively is very good. We know their defense is a little susceptible at times. I think a big part of why this total is where it is because NC State people don't respect their offense, and it's struggled at times.
Yeah, they haven't corrected it. Yeah,
they've had
the
some
numbers
issues,
exactly,
but it's starting to get a little bit better for NC State. Now, look, last week it was a terrible Wake defense. Wake is very bad on defense. I totally get that, but they did score 30. They finally got some production going. Remember, Grayson McCall got injured again. He actually started, gets injured again. And CJ Bailey has to once again finish in that game. And he played well. It was definitely CJ Bailey's best performance so far in a game for NC State. And remember, he had to play before that because Grayson McCall got hurt previously against Louisiana Tech. If I'm Grayson McCall, I seriously think about calling it quits. I really do. These are multiple concussions now this guy has suffered. Once again in concussion protocol. It's one of those Tua deals, Tua Tagovailoa, where think about your future, man, your well-being, your physical health. This is now multiple concussions that Grayson McCall has suffered, and you really wonder about what his future is going to be playing football because of this. He might have to make some really serious, tough, hard decisions as far as his future is concerned. But, as of right now, he's in concussion protocol. Hasn't been ruled out for Saturday's game, Grayson McCall, but he is in concussion protocol right now, questionable, which means we might see CJ Bailey in again. And he is coming off one of his better performances. So I think there's a potential for NC State to be able to have some offensive success here. but so will Syracuse. I mean, NC State's defense has clearly struggled, 34 allowed in the loss to Wake Forest over the weekend. The key here is what are we going to get from NC State in the pass defense? They're giving up 216.7 passing yards per game, 74th. That's not great. And obviously, that's the strength of the Syracuse offense. It's Kyle McCord in the passing game with Gadsden and all those great receivers. So I think Syracuse moves the ball on NC State. And I think NC State can move the football a little bit on Syracuse. So I do like this over a little bit, 54.5. I'm not taking a team that's 0-6 against the spread. That's NC State this season. They have not covered a number. I get it. They're a home dog. Syracuse is off a back and forth, big time overtime win against UNLV. It's not the greatest of spots for Syracuse to lay points on the road, but I'd still prefer Syracuse. NC State's a very tough team for me to back right now. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, why would you want to back this team? They're 0-6. When you don't cover numbers, you're not going to get my money.
A Wake team that hasn't been great and has had a shit defense all year, and they still lost outright as favorites at home.
And a shit defense. And that I still think they're just not correcting. Their totals were in the 40, and they bumped it up. Last week, though, Wake was so bad, I'm like, that game should get over. And they gave up 34 to Wake. NC State's defense, it just isn't that good. Like, this maybe a team in NC State, if Bailey's in, starts playing well, but now I want it back maybe towards the end of the year. And like I'm not getting enough in this game. So I do lean Syracuse a little bit. Maybe look at just their team total. McCord's just been able, to throw it. Seems like he's 350 every week. I don't know what changes. I know they're off the big win. It's not the easiest place to play, but right now they're just a better football team. So I just lean Syracuse here.
For me, it's definitely Syracuse or pass. I want no part of it. NC State 0-6 against the spread. I've said this a million times. When teams this deep into the season, they haven't covered a number, I'm not backing them until I see them cover a number first. And obviously, we haven't seen that yet with NC State. Very disappointing year for Dave Doran. This was supposed to be an ACC contender and hardly anything resembling one right now. Missouri and UMass. We've got Missouri 27.5-point road favorites, 53.5 the total in that game. It was a terrible look for Missouri against Texas A&M. That was a team that you thought we could compete with, and you were just blown off the field. You were not. You look like Pee Wee football, JV football compared to Texas A&M in that game. 41-10. Brady Cook struggled. They made Brady Cook look bad. 13-31. There was no run game with Nate Noel, the transfer from App State. Other than Luther Burden, who had 82 receiving yards, they kept everyone else in that receiving core in check. And then the defense was shredded. And this was my concern, C-Mac, coming into the year with Missouri, was that their defense lost a lot of pieces from last year. It didn't look that way early, but when you play Buffalo and Murray State and Boston College, and your defensive numbers may look better than they are, and then you played a Vanderbilt team that almost beat you at home, 30-27. They did struggle on defense in that game, and then they just got whipped on that side of the football by returning Connor Wegman at quarterback and this Texas A&M offense that did whatever they wanted against Missouri. It was ugly. I mean, they're giving up big pass plays, 276 through the air, only 4 incomplete passes on 22 pass attempts for Wegman. They could not stop Le'Veon Moss, who had just a huge day, 138 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns in the win for A&M. A lot of people are throwing around the F word when it comes to Missouri after that game. And no, not the 4-letter F word. I'm talking about fraud. I can't believe how many times I saw people throw that word out there about Missouri after that A&M loss, that they're frauds, that they're not really that good. I'd pump the brakes on that. Clearly, they're not maybe as good as you maybe thought, but I don't know about frauds. Here's the problem, though. Missouri's got another SEC game next week with Auburn, and this is nestled in between. And UMass has been a sneaky little point spread team so far this year, especially as underdogs. Now, first game of the against Toledo, they covered as a 17-point dog the last time, and then 15.5-point dog against Miami. They covered. They lost by 3 on the road. And then at Northern Illinois, they covered again. They were 17-point dogs. They got bet all the way down to 14. They lost 34-20. So 3-0 against the spread this year for UMass as a double-digit underdog. So but I feel like I could only take UMass because they've been good double-digit dogs. Fomachan has been able to move the football a little bit for them from the quarterback spot. He's been all right. Their defense is still a little shaky. And look, if Northern Illinois doesn't turn the ball over as much, they did give up 367 rushing yards to Northern Illinois, even though they got the cover for me last week. That is a concern. But you do look at the UMass defense, and the UMass defense has actually been okay against the pass. And that's probably the strength of Missouri offensively, is how they can throw the football with those great receivers and with Brady Cook throwing it to them. So I don't know. I'm still leaning UMass here. That's a lot of points for Missouri to be laying on the road. I know they're going to be maybe angry in a bad mood, but then they play Auburn in the SEC. Are they really going to be focused and wanting to whip UMass pillar to post for 60 minutes? I'm not sure. I'm definitely Minutemen or pass here. CMAC, what do you think?
Well, they better be, because they just got their ass whipped
Against
A&M.
I'm concerned about with taking UMass is that maybe it is 40-0 or something, and they wake up.
I worry about that a little bit. Yeah. And maybe this is like take Missouri first half in this one. I kind of thought too, God, right now this isn't over 4 touchdowns. That feel a little bit, I mean, we're right there, but every point counts here. UMass looked pretty good. I liked them when they were getting, what was it, 14 against
Miami Northern Illinois, Toledo. They covered all those games.
Covered them all. They had the bad loss to Buffalo. Like, I think Missouri does what they want, but this is a little bit sleepy spot. But after a loss, they should be ready to go. One thing with Missouri was their defense. Like, they need to get back to it. Like, obviously, A&M 276, but they ran all over 236 on the ground. I thought the Missouri defense was a little bit better, and they got that ass kicked last week. So it's back to practice, I think, for the defense in this one. And this is the team they should be able to take care of. But I don't know if I can get there. But I hope they, if you take them, I hope they cash for you. Man, UMass. I love an ugly dog.
Yeah. The strength is the secondary, though, for UMass. They're 19th as far as passing yards allowed per game. Pretty solid there.
They haven't played anybody, but yeah.
No, they played Toledo. Toledo's got a good passing attack, I think.
All right.
They're all right. Yeah. The other teams, you're right. There's some issues with, quality of passing attack. But Toledo's the one that they played okay. Well, they did give up 38, but they covered in that game. Yeah, that would be the concern here, obviously. But boy, they've been good to me. I think that's another part of it too. I've been cashing multiple times with UMass in this double-digit dog roll, so I guess that's kind of another reason why I'm
some of these teams you get on. It's been Charlotte for me this year, Monroe for me, multiple games. I had UMass once, I haven't had them twice, but I get it.
All right, I put this game on the schedule. It's a MAC game, but it's a good MAC game. It's 2 teams I think could win this conference: Northern Illinois and Bowling Green. Bowling Green 3-point home favorites, 47.5 the total. Northern Illinois last week struggled with UMass, but got the job done ultimately. They did have a lot of turnovers. Ethan Hampton's a solid quarterback, but man, he has a bad turnover, it seems, every week. And, thankfully the run game bailed them out against UMass. The pass game didn't really deliver all that much, although the conditions were kind of windy for that football game. But nevertheless, we'll see if they can fare a little bit better offensively. I think Bowling Green is kind of the last couple of games hit a bit of a wall, just because, look who they played. They played A&M, they played Penn State, they played so many of these big-time games in non-conference, and they've kind of hit a wall because they lost to Old Dominion. It wasn't a good look for them to lose that game, and they struggled with Akron last week. And I took Bowling Green after losing to Old Dominion thinking they would whip Akron, and they barely won. They had to hang on and get a stop at the end to get the win against Akron. So Bowling Green has kind of fallen back a little bit after that very impressive showing they had in non-conference play. They still have only 1 win on the year, but again, I definitely think they're much better than a 1-win team because they had a tough schedule. They had a couple of games that went against them, but we'll see how they fare. Well, actually, I should say they've won 2 games now after the win against Akron over the weekend. But look, ODU, they should have won that, but A&M, Penn State, they played a pretty tough schedule here, which should serve them well for MAC play. Of course, Northern Illinois has played a couple good teams too, NC State and Notre Dame. Great game. I'm looking forward to this. This is one of the better games, certainly one of the best group of 5 games on Saturday. But I'm leaning Bowling Green at home. Anything -3 or better with Bowling Green at home. I like Baselac more than Hampton. I think the defense is kind of maybe a slight edge to NIU, but Bowling Green's defense is capable at home. And I still thought coming into the year Bowling Green would be better than NIU. NIU would be good, but Bowling Green would be even better. So at 3 or better, I'm gonna go with Bowling Green here. Should be a good game though in this one. C-Mac, what do you think?
The one thing I was just trying to check was Bowling Green's defense against the run. I just wanted to double check their numbers because Northern Illinois, they got to run it, and that's what they do here. Yeah, I mean that's their identity. Hampton, I mean, last week he only had like 50 yards.
They are weaker against the run, Bowling Green, so that is a concern here for me matchup wise. Yep.
Okay, and like the Notre Dame game was 10-19, 198, and if he does turn it over, it's just he is what he is. Northern Illinois it's kind of beat up on Bowling Green the last few years. Man, this is a tough game because I think at home Bowling Green could win this one.
Yep.
But I'm kind of interested in Northern Illinois. Keep
in mind, they outgained Northern Illinois last year in the loss, so Bowling Green probably deserved a better. It's a great game. Like this, you could this one of those games where it's a good game. It's two good teams, two MAC contenders. You can make a case for both sides. Yep.
Yeah, if they can run it well, they're in it. If Bowling Green can stuff it, take that away, they could win this and cover. But I'm not so sure that happens. Yeah, this is a good one.
Well, keep in mind too, MAC play only started last week, so both of these teams forget their overall record. These two teams are 1-0 in conference play so far. So basically, yeah, they're definitely in the mix when it comes. That's a good point, Phil. The kill if Northern Illinois Toledo next week, another big game for them. Yeah, this should be big for them because they should know Bowling Green's a really good team. You should be focused, but we will see on Saturday. That's a good game. Louisville, Virginia. Louisville, 7-point road favorites. Total in this game, 54.5 across the board. Great comeback by Virginia. Let's give them some credit. Calandria, they went with a quarterback instead of the musket man this year, and Calandria has delivered for this football team. He's played very, very well for them. So we'll see how they fare here. Virginia against, this is a step up in class, though, for Virginia. Louisville, pretty good football team, albeit coming off back-to-back losses, Notre Dame and SMU. I was very surprised the Louisville defense had the issues they did against SMU to the extent they did. Kevin Jennings just ripped them up. 281 through the air, 113 on the ground from the quarterback running the football as well. Kevin Jennings for SMU in that win against Louisville. So see if they can bounce back on defense. Their offense is still playing very well. Tyler Shuck, another good game. Isaac Brown running the ball. They've got Ja'Cory Brooks and Amari Huggins-Bruce, two very good receivers for this Cardinals offense. Virginia is at home, though, and we look at them at home this year. They beat BC last week, came back. Did lose to Maryland by double digits, but they had a lot of turnovers in that game. Came back against Wake, so they've been the comeback kids a little bit this year. They came back to beat Wake. They came back to beat Boston College last week. We'll see how they fare here in this one. Last year at Louisville, Virginia was a 20.5-point dog. I remember this game, and Louisville with 31-24. It was a pretty even game as far as total yardage is concerned. So we'll see how this one goes. Virginia, I look at them, and in this kind of game, I could see it going over the total because against the better offenses, they faced Wake, 61 points. It went over the total. Coastal Carolina, 67 points in that game. It went over the total. BC stayed under and Maryland stayed under. But again, the Maryland game might have even gone over the total if they didn't turn it over as much as they did Virginia. So I lean over. I think it's tough from a side perspective. I definitely think Louisville's the better team, and they've lost to two very respectable teams, Notre Dame and SMU, in back-to-back weeks. But I don't know if I'm ready to lay a full 7 with Louisville here. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, no way here. I'm on Virginia in this game.
Well, with the old Wahoos, yeah.
3-1 ATS. I love it. I mean, against BC, they were down last week and just came roaring back in that fourth quarter. Field goal, they get the touchdown, they get the 2-point conversion, and then that fumble recovery for the touchdown, and that was it. 18 points in the fourth, and they win it. I was impressed a little bit where they went and kind of beat down Coastal Carolina at home. I love the spot with them getting more than a touchdown. I saw enough with Louisville. The offense is good, and this game could be tight. That's why I want the touchdown. 7.5 here with Virginia. Shuck can throw it, but this Louisville defense still has issues against, I think, any team that can move it, and I think Virginia can. Louisville too. You talked about the total. That game went over. They've been good 4-1 to the over this year, and against SMU. And they gave up plenty of big plays in that game against SMU, especially early. SMU at 24 after the first. So I think both teams will have success moving it, but give me the home dog here with the touchdown. I'll take that all day. I'll dare, Shuck. I really think it's more the Louisville defense, to do enough here where they win by margin. So I'm on Virginia.
No, I agree. That was a very good that was actually a solid defense they had under Jeff Brom last year. They're way weaker on that side of the ball this year. That's the issue.
They play Miami too, Louisville too, right next. That's their next game. A little look ahead, maybe.
That's probably why they're 4-1 to the over too. I think their offense is a lot better with Tyler Shuck than with Jack Plummer. I think we can all agree with that. But their defense is definitely not as good this year. So their offense is a lot better, but their defense is a lot worse. It looks like this year, Louisville. And that's another reason why they've been trending over so far this season. All right, Florida and Tennessee. Tennessee 15.5-point home favorites, 54 the total here in this game. Okay, I don't want to push the panic button if you're Mr. Rocky Top here in Tennessee, but I will say this about that loss to Arkansas. And Arkansas is, capable of a game like that when they're on, and it wasn't a great game from their offense, but they did enough. What I was impressed with, or maybe unimpressed with Tennessee's offense, which had done a number on everybody, and it was a very pedestrian night for Nico Iamaleava, only 156 passing yards. Dylan Sampson did run for 140. That was probably the strength of the offense for Tennessee, but all things considered, Arkansas did a solid job. And the Tennessee defense, they gave up 266 through the air. I don't think they respected Talon Green's ability to throw the football. Why would they? I mean, he's been very erratic, Talon Green, throwing the football. Not Saturday night, though. Man, 19 for 27, 266 through the air. That's one of the best passing performances I've seen from Talon Green in his career, Boise and Arkansas combined. It was very, very impressive. And that carried the Arkansas offense to victory. And remember, Tennessee's secondary is the one area of the team that's a little bit weak. And he kind of picked on that last week in that big Arkansas win as double-digit home dogs against Tennessee. So now you got Tennessee off a loss. They should be refocused, ready to go. But then you start to look at who they played. They played Chattanooga, NC State, who are way down. They haven't even covered a point spread this year, which we mentioned earlier. Kent State, who's abysmal. Oklahoma, who has a very pedestrian offense. You start to look at that Tennessee schedule, and it's not like you've been facing, the best teams or just a plethora of phenomenal football teams to this point. Then you played someone that was probably a little bit better than NC State, definitely better than NC State, on par with Oklahoma, probably better than Oklahoma offensively, probably on par with them or close to it defense, maybe not quite as good defensively, but you get what I mean. Definitely someone better offensively. They kind of struggle and they lose to Arkansas. The problem is Florida in that category, where this is going to be now a tough challenge for Tennessee. I'm not sure. But Tennessee, or Florida rather, they beat up a bad Mississippi State team. I really wasn't that impressed. But after a bye week, they focus against UCF, and the defense played their best game, and they did whatever they wanted on offense. And I think they realized, UCF's struggling mightily on offense to move the ball. We can just sit on the lead, and that's exactly what they did. But Florida has shown some signs of life and a pulse again these last couple games. Can they show enough of a pulse here to stay within 15.5 points? I will say this, and I'm not always a big series history guy, CMAC, because I'm usually someone that says it's all about this year's teams, this year's spot, this year's matchup. But you can't deny Florida against Tennessee, 8-2 straight up, 7-3 against the spread the last 10 meetings. They covered last year at Florida, 29-16. Florida won outright last year against Tennessee, 29-16 back in September. And they played, they were right there with Tennessee. So is this too many points? Even with Tennessee coming off a loss against Arkansas, where you would think they have full focus, and we still think they're better than Florida, but are they enough of a better football team to win by 16, 17 points here in this game. So we'll see how that one plays out. But I think it's a tricky game. So I still firmly believe Tennessee is better than Florida, maybe a lot better than Florida, because we also can't forget that when Florida played like one of the class teams in college football this year, Miami, they got schooled. They got housed 41-17. So tricky game. It really is. But that Florida series history is probably going to keep me off Tennessee. C-Mac, what do you think here?
That was the biggest thing. This Florida team couldn't stop anybody on the run, and UCF couldn't do anything. 40
Shocking.
for 108. That was it. That was
to
it.
you. I had the over there, oldie, with UCF Florida, and UCF
I had the over. I had the over. Florida hadn't stopped anything, and I didn't think they'd do it there.
What happened to R.J. Harvey? This guy couldn't be stopped, and now all of a sudden, 2 weeks in a row, he's been just totally bottled up for UCF.
Yeah. We'll see. I mean, Florida, that's the best I've seen them look. Team, flat out. And the line went against everyone that was moving to UCF last week. That went from, them to favored basically by 3. So, I mean, hats off to Florida there. I think if you like Tennessee, I mean, what are we going to get? The bad Florida defense that I saw them play better and stop the run, or, that played better, or this bad defense that I saw get, shredded against Miami? I think if you like Tennessee, you look at their team total in this game, and that last game, penalties, they just out of sorts. I mean, congrats to Arkansas. I'm glad I took them there late on Saturday. The defense was good, and they were good down the stretch. And Nico he was just off, It was kind of just like running for his life, dink and dunk. It did not look good. Then the defense looked all right. Florida? I still think this Tennessee defense is pretty good. Maybe it's not top 5 or 10, but I think it's, top 40 for sure. Can they hold down Mertz and this Florida team? Florida's had a lot of success, like you talked about, versus Tennessee and over the years. So can they cover this double digit? Can I go to Florida here, Devano? They've been one team that just hasn't been good to me the last couple of years.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to pass. When you have a team that you clearly have struggled with, either betting on or against them, that's always a good idea.
Yeah, it's them because they're horrible. They can't get the job done. They used, but I'm tempted with them. I don't know.
All right, next up, we've got Clemson and Wake Forest. Clemson, 20.5-point road favorites, 60.5 the total. Clemson team total over stands out to me. Wake is just abysmal. They are so bad defensively. But the good news is they put up 34. Their own offense was very good against NC State, which allowed them to beat them. But their defense still struggled against a guy that was, number 2 quarterback on the depth chart, C.J. Bailey. So this is still not a good Wake defense at all. We saw them get ripped by Louisiana, the Ragin' Cajuns, the week before, giving up 41, 40 to Ole Miss, 31 to Virginia, blew a lead in that game. I mean, Clemson should be able to have a ton of success here offensively. They only play Virginia after this, so there's no look-ahead spot for Clemson here in this game. Last 2 games they were at Wake. What's funny is last year they struggled offensively, but we know the Clemson Tigers last year had a down year, especially on offense, but they've scored 51 and 37 the last 2 times they've visited Wake Forest. I'll say this about Klubnik. He's certainly playing better. 14 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 64.3% completions. And when it comes to Wake's defense, C-Mac, it's both ways. They're giving up 4.7 yards per carry, 168 rushing yards per game, almost 300 passing yards per game. So whether it's Cade Klubnik through the air, Phil Maffa on the ground, Clemson should be able to put up some points and have success here. So I lean to the 20.5, laying it 2, but I do feel the team total is the better option here with Clemson in this game. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yes, because all of a sudden, can Wake stop anything? Here? I mean, ULL had so far 38. They just gave up 30. Ole Miss, 40. They're not very good. So this is a lot, though. 3 scores. And on the flip, though, I wanted to look at this more. Can this Wake offense maybe, do some damage against
Bachmeier? Because the full game over is my lean. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think you could get there. I mean, Wake, the overs, if you've been betting them 4-1, they have been money. I've been on a couple of them. And last week I was kicking myself I wasn't on that the Wake Forest NC State, which I thought was a little light at 53, because Clemson should be able to do what they want. Yeah, maybe look at their team total. I don't know if I can get over the 21 here. I might take Wake Forest. This is a big number, not a very good football team, but I think they could maybe move the ball here and hang around.
Yeah, and even if they're down,
and they've dominated it.
Backdoor it, maybe.
Savannah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Some of these games have been close the last few years, but Clemson dominated them. I think they've won over 10 in a row. 12 in a row, I believe. But the last couple, last
Wake's covered 3 of 4 against Clemson. 3 of the last 4.
They've covered. Yep. They've lost outright, but the last couple they've been right there. So I might have to go with the ugly dog here in Wake.
All right. Hopefully it's one of those deals. Clemson goes over their team total, but Wake covers. That could happen. Like Clemson could go over their team total, but Wake Forest covers the full game number.
Oh yeah,
that could totally happen in this game.
It's tough not seeing Clemson at least getting 30, like at least getting 35, like right there. But I think Wake, at home here, could score a little bit.
Yep. Yet the offense, as Ross says in the chat, bogged down a little bit last week in the second half. Clemson against Florida State, so that'll make it. But again, Florida State's had issues, but they've still got a better defense than Wake, based on what I've seen. So, like I said, I have a hard time trusting Wake to stop anything at the moment. All right, Mississippi State, Georgia. Georgia, 32.5-point home favorites, 53.5 the total in this game. I mean, I'm not laying it with Georgia. I know Mississippi State is absolutely terrible, brutal. And Jeff Lebby, it's a work in progress with him with this program. I'm not sure they made the best hire either if he's cut out to turn this program around. It's just been dreadful here with Mississippi State and Starkville since the passing of Mike Leach. It's been downhill since then. This Georgia team, though, they failed to cover 4 straight, and their only point spread cover, as we talked about, was that opener against Clemson. It's not easy to back this team. And I'll say this about Mississippi State. They played mighty Texas last week, CMAC, 35-13. They covered the number, only lost by 22. The Van Buren boys, Michael Van Buren, he played a little bit better for Mississippi State at the quarterback spot. Defense at least played at least a little bit better. Oh, they still gave up almost 500 yards to Arch Manning and company, but still at least a little bit better than we thought. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I lean Mississippi State here, but I don't know if I'll bet it. I don't. It's just Georgia to me with what we've seen from them. They haven't covered since the Clemson game. They're not getting to these margins as big favorites this year so far, as bigger favorites like they are here. So probably going to be a pass here. CMAC, what do you think?
I mean, Georgia they haven't covered. Like why would you want to put your money on? And last week with Mississippi State and Auburn team total stayed under. That was what I liked in that game. Yep. They stayed under. They had 13. I thought the defense would bounce back in that one. Mississippi State, they just field goals. I mean, that's the difference when you can't get in and score against Texas. Because that first half of football, I thought that's the best they played. And while I know Manning had a big, 50, 55-yarder right before they scored a touchdown. But Mississippi State was moving the ball, but just settling for a couple field goals. And then they were down 14-6. And then, Texas took care of business. But Mississippi State hung in there. Their defense still is awful. I don't know how they stop really Georgia at all. But this is a ton of points. I'd take Mississippi State. Give me the dog or nothing in this game.
Yeah,
let's see Georgia cover.
But I'm kind of with you. I am.
I don't know if I bet this, but I lean the dog.
And you're right. There's the Beck and the Georgia offenses. They had the great second half against Alabama, but game to game consistent. Like the Kentucky game, they struggled. They had spurts against Auburn where they looked great, but to cover a number like this, you got to be pedal to the metal on offense for the full game.
Full bore.
That's what we're going to have to see here from them. All right, Cincinnati and UCF. UCF 3-point home favorites, 59 the total. I'm already on Cincinnati here, and I can understand why this went from 4 down to 3. UCF, I'm officially starting to panic a little bit. That Florida game was dreadful, how they stuck in mud against that defense that whole game. And then, of course, they got walloped by Colorado, couldn't stop the pass, and Shedeur Sanders before that. This might be wrong team favored because Cincinnati's a team I circled the bet against before the season, and they've proven me wrong. They're better than I thought. And I'm not a big Scott Satterfield fan, but I got to give him credit where credit's due. This has been a solid football team. I know they lost to Texas Tech in their last game, a heartbreaker, but they still scored 41. I think the guy that's impressed me, and he's probably been one of the most improved quarterbacks of the year, is Brendan Sorsby, the Indiana transfer for Cincy.
Yeah, he's been solid.
Much better this year. He's got 12 touchdowns and 1 interception. He's protected the football. He's completing 66% of his passes, 9 yards per pass attempt. Like I said, 12-1 TD to INT ratio, 165 rushing yards as well. He has really done a nice job. He's a much improved player at the quarterback position for this Bearcats team. And then you look at the offense on the other side. They spotty against Colorado, couldn't get anything going against Florida. And the UCF defense has been abysmal most of the year. Now, in the second half, they played well against Florida, but I think Florida took it light on them. Just run the ball, kill the clock.
Yeah.
They didn't pile it on much against UCF. But when that game was there to be won in the first half, UCF's defense couldn't stop anything. Graham Mertz going down the field with that Florida offense over and over against them. So it's still not, to me, a great defense, UCF. I think Cincinnati can go in there and win. And the mystique of the bounce house is gone because Colorado went in there and thumped them as double-digit underdogs. So, yeah, Cincinnati for me. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, these have been really good games the last couple of years between these. And the line kind of just like this. They're like 2.5, 3.5. And tight games before that, Cincinnati, when they were humming, had success and could beat.
Bye week, too.
UCF.
Off a bye for the Cincinnati as well.
Off a bye. If UCF can't run the football, from what I saw, I they could not run against that Florida run defense. I like to say, with Sorsby, he at India could throw it. I mean, get into some trouble, but they had some shootouts before he had left, and he does have an arm. And they got into, the huge win against Houston, and then the back and forth with Texas Tech. To me, this is Cincy. I'll take the 3, but I think money line. I know this is a bounce house. Usually, I don't love going against it there, and maybe this is a bounce back for UCF. But I think Cincinnati will have success moving the football here in this game.
That's why I like this spot even more for Cincy, because, it's a bounce back for UCF. They've obviously lost. It's a bounce back for Cincy. They lost that game to Texas Tech 2 weeks ago before the bye week. So now they did have some injuries at running back, and they did have some injuries on defense, Cincy. So check that throughout the course of the week. Hopefully they're healthier. Hopefully the bye week helps that when it comes to
they have a couple linemen, D linemen and stuff. Yeah.
And that you could tell against Texas Tech, they really struggled on defense. Hopefully they're healthier. If they are, I think they can win that game. All right, Georgia Tech, North Carolina. Georgia Tech 6-point road favorites, 59 the total. This is one of my favorite bets of the week, early in the week. Didn't even hesitate. In fact, I jumped on it. 4.5 I got early, last night on Georgia Tech. It's up to 6. I agree with it. North Carolina's fade city for me right now. The James Madison loss was the start of the downfall, blowing that 20-0 lead, giving up 21 unanswered to your arch rival Duke, and losing 21-20 after that. And then last week against Pitt, you know what? They compete. They're okay on offense still. Jacoby Criswell's all right. And the offense has Amarion Hampton. He's a very good running back, very balanced offense, but that defense sucks. It just does. Let's be honest. They couldn't protect the lead against Duke. They gave up 70 to James Madison. Pitt went up and down the field all game. You know what was just death by 1,000 cuts, that old saying, and dying a slow, painful death? That was watching North Carolina's Civ defense, the final drive of that game against Pitt. Pitt's just methodically just winding the clock down, running the ball down their throat. Holstein, every third down conversion, he made it on that drive to put that game away and give Pitt the 10-point lead in that game. That tells you all you need to know. It's just a defense, not very good. It's worn down. It doesn't get turnovers. It doesn't get stops when they need it. It's North, and you got to wonder where the psyche is. It's now 3 straight losses. The season's slipping away. Mac Brown's probably done, after this season.
He's gone.
He's not coming back. For me, this was a pretty easy decision. Anything less than a touchdown, lay it with Haynes King and company, Georgia Tech. Now, I know on the road at times, and I know as favorites at times, they've not always been great. We know that. And Syracuse earlier this year, and there's some other examples, but no, I think this is Georgia Tech all the way still for me in spite of that.
Yeah.
C-Mac, what do you think?
You have to look at it. I know the Syracuse, I didn't want them there. And like I said, they got lucky a little bit with Duke. Duke had them under game. They score a touchdown. They go right down the field again, miss the field goal. And Georgia Tech got that last touchdown, 24-14. And Duke went down again, but they had to go for it. Couldn't get anything else. I'm like, That fucking that hurt. So that was the right side. And that's the thing with Georgia Tech is favorite. But how can you back North Carolina, Havana? This team doesn't cover numbers last year. They're 0 for this year. This team, even as a dog, I can't back them at all. And what do we get? Georgia Tech's been a great under team. You know, some of these games they've had in years past have just been shootouts, obviously, because North Carolina doesn't have a defense. So it'll go back and forth. I don't know if I mess with that. Kind of with Georgia Tech, the under's been so good. And some of these North Carolina games, their offense isn't good enough to get over. You know what I mean? They couldn't score. They couldn't score in the fourth, you know, this last week at all. So I don't know if I mess with that. Georgia Tech, the under has just been money. I had a piece of it in the Duke game too. But I agree with you here. And I hate Key really as a favorite. But I think kind of in this number, you got to take him. I mean, you would be taking a shot in the dark right now with a team that's died, with a coach on his way out with Brown and a team that hasn't covered a number to basically say, you know, can North Carolina stand up? Maybe they do, but
can they rally the troops? I'm going to have to see it before I believe it. So that's why this week, now last week with that Pitt North Carolina game, I had Pitt team total over. Both of those casts.
Solid.
I also had the full game over, and it fell short. It should have. North Carolina didn't do enough. So that's why this game I'm leaning more toward Georgia Tech and Georgia Tech team total over, less on the full game over, because you know, and Georgia Tech's defense is better this year, you know, than we saw last year.
It is.
No doubt about that. It's getting better.
It definitely is. The numbers show. It's you know, I know that. Yeah, it's been solid.
And Pitt's offensive line, which is pretty solid, wore down North Carolina's defense as that game went on. Georgia Tech can do the same. Georgia Tech on paper's got one of the better offensive lines in the ACC this year. So that's a problem for North Carolina as this game goes on. Speaking of problems, how about Purdue? They're taking on Illinois. Illinois 19.5-point home favorites, 50 the total. Nice to see Ryan Walters fix the problem with the offense. He's clearly thought that firing the offensive coordinator would be what fixes it, and they put up a whopping 6 points last week against against Wisconsin. God, they're really bad. They are awful. They've now 0-4 straight up, 0-4 against the spread. The only win in cover was their opener against Indiana State, an FCS team. Look at these scores, too. 66-7 to Notre Dame, 38-21 to Oregon State, 28-10 to Nebraska, 52-6. That was a shellacking in Madison for this Purdue team against Wisconsin. They are unbackable, completely and utterly unbackable right now. This offense is pathetic. The change in the OC didn't do shit. I don't understand why Ryan Walters is doing that anyway. You just don't have personnel to move the football. Hudson Card's bad. They have no run game to speak of whatsoever. The whole line is getting destroyed, blown up week in and week out. Can't have any part of Purdue right now. None. Zero. At this point in time. Meanwhile, you have Illinois off a bye for Bielema and off the 21-7 loss to Penn State on that Saturday night where they covered the number. They hung in there, but the offense and Luke Altmaier finally looked a little bit like Luke Altmaier again in that game. He kind of struggled. But this isn't Penn State's defense on the road. This is this is Purdue's defense at home off a bye in a bounce back spot. I think, and look, let's not forget, even though Altmaier C-Mac struggled against Penn State, he was lighting it up before that. Went to Nebraska. They beat the Cornhuskers. He played a great game. Played great before that. The Kansas game, he played well. I think they get back to doing whatever they want on offense here, Illinois. I think Altmaier can have success again throwing the ball. Caden Fegan can run the ball. They've got Zachary Franklin, the UTSA transfer at receiver, who's become a big weapon for Illinois this year. I don't normally lay it like this type of number with Brett Bielema, but I think I'm making an exception here, C-Mac. I think they drill him, personally. Purdue is that bad. The 3 touchdowns or more off a bye and off a loss prior to the bye. I think Illinois shows up and just drubs and drills this sad sack, sorry-ass Purdue team and a horrible head coach, horrible, in Ryan Walters. So, I'm laying it with Illinois. C-Mac, what do you think?
If you're ever going to do it, this seems like now, too. And these have been tough. Purdue's kind of had Illinois' number over the past years, but this Purdue team is just awful. They're just, I know the last few years haven't been great, but it's been really bad this year. I mean, Wisconsin got the total on their own and just beat them down again. And they've got their ass whipped consistently by Wisconsin. Yeah, Illinois off the bye. This team just keeps covering. So, I mean, I get why it's like take them or nothing in this one. Is this one of these games like Illinois, there's a big favorite like this. Do they cover a ton? But Purdue showed nothing. They're at the bottom. Their offense is at the bottom, and their defense is at the bottom in like all the categories. If you look at this Purdue team, just when you score in 6, you scored 10 against Nebraska. I mean, that was only an 18-point game. That was at home. On the road, they've got beat down. At Oregon State, 38-20. They had 21 there. They only had 7 against Notre Dame. Illinois team total here. I'll be on that. I think I might not mess around with the team total. It seems like these teams get it. I mean, they should get 35 or so in this game, right?
Yep. You know what's funny is that Ryan Walters was the defensive coordinator here at Illinois under Brett Bielema before he got the Purdue job. And yet, you're right about Purdue. Purdue's beaten Illinois outright 4 straight times.
Yeah, they kind of had their number.
They've had their number. So that's a small little fear I have, but I think if you're Brett Bielema, you've got to stop this nonsense. How can you let this guy that coached under you come in here and beat you again when they've looked this bad so far in the last 4 weeks? No, this is where it's got to be. You got to put your foot down if you're Bielema and say enough of this. We're getting it done here.
And this is one of the worst. This may be the worst Purdue team I've ever seen.
Yeah,
I mean, they're always a decent football team, but this is their tough times. The last few years haven't been great, but this has been real bad.
How bad are Ryan Brown, Marcus Davila, and Bennett Meredith, 3 other quarterbacks on this Purdue roster, if they can't even get in? Because Hudson Card's been terrible, and they still haven't made a change. It's terrible. Bad situation. Bad football right now in West Lafayette. All right, Wisconsin and Rutgers. Rutgers 2.5-point home favorites. 40 the total in this game. I mean, Rutgers at home laying less than a field goal. It's hard for me to go against that. Cashed a ticket with them in this very point spread range a couple weeks ago against Washington on that Friday night where they got the job done at home. I mean, Greg Schiano has physically and mentally tough teams. That being said, they're going to have to play better offensively here than they did against Nebraska, losing 14-7 over the weekend. It was definitely ugly for the offense. Kaliakmanis was awful, and that's the biggest fear I have with Rutgers this year is that guy as their quarterback, 15 of 37, 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown, sub 50% completions. Monungai was bottled up by the Nebraska defense, and when they can't run, they can't move it on offense, Rutgers. They have to be able to run the football. And credit to Nebraska, they were great on defense. But Rutgers' defense was really good. Dylan Raiola did not have a good game. I mean, 13 of 27, only 134 passing yards. Nebraska really struggled to run the ball. It's just Nebraska's offense was slightly better than Rutgers, and that was the difference in that game. But now they're back home. Wisconsin on the road this year. They lost 38-21 at USC. It was their only other true road game this year. It was the game where they had a good first half, and then they absolutely crumbled in the second half. They get blown out by Alabama. They don't cover against Western Michigan. Their only cover was against Purdue, one of the worst teams going in power conference football right now. So to me, the jury is out there on Wisconsin against this Rutgers defense going on the road and being able to move the football. I'm not totally sold on Braden Locke. Yeah, he played well against Purdue, but everyone's playing well against Purdue. And he still had 2 interceptions against Purdue as well, Braden Locke. So Tawi Walker running the football, that's not going to be easy to do against Rutgers. Rutgers is a very good run defense. So I don't know if Wisconsin's offense, and you can say what you want, C-Mac, about Kaliakmanis, the Greek stallion. He's not that good. And their own offense isn't great. But I don't know if Wisconsin's going to be able to run the football with a great deal of success here against Rutgers in this game. I'm leaning Rutgers at anything less than a field goal at home. And definitely, even though this total's low at 40, it's under or nothing for me in this game. I don't see Wisconsin marching up and down the field, and I don't see Rutgers, even at home, marching up and down the field either. So Rutgers and under for me if I were to get involved in this one. C-Mac, what do you think here?
Yeah, low total. I still think this could stay under the number. Both defenses are pretty good. And I don't trust, Rutgers, you got that win against Washington. But, man, they got outplayed in that game. And that game stayed under. They got the win, 21-18, as just, 1-point favorites covered. And they go, tons of wind in that game, against Nebraska. The offense in the end just can't get going. Hats off to Nebraska's defense. It's pretty good, but they're not great. But Rutgers just couldn't do anything, in the end. at all. Kaliak Manis, I don't. I mean, 15 to 37. I don't trust it. I want the other way, but I want 3 here with Wisconsin. I think they're a little bit of the better football team. I like Rutgers, and I like to back them a ton. But even as a short favorite here, this would be a good win for Rutgers, even after that loss, to get back and go to 5-1. And I really don't love this Wisconsin team. The win was, you mentioned Locke, the picks. You can't have that in this game. So maybe it comes down to like one of these quarterbacks makes a couple plays, or the defenses make a big play, a big interception, something like that, because it seems like it's close. And if it's close, I want the points. So Wisconsin.
All right. Next up, we've got Kansas State and Colorado in the Big 12. Kansas State, 4.5-point road favorites, 56.5, I should say, the total here in this game. Has Deion Sanders in Colorado turned a corner, I guess, is the big question, right? Because there's no doubt the last couple weeks, albeit the Baylor game was, without a Hail Mary pass, they lose that game. But then to, have a beatdown like they did against UCF after that on the road, very impressive, although not as impressive after seeing UCF stumble and sputter against Florida over the weekend. But they've covered 3 in a row. The road win by 28-9 against Colorado State started this little streak after the Nebraska loss. The win against Baylor, the win on the road at UCF, and outright as double-digit underdogs. They're off a bye week as well, Deion and Colorado. For this game. So we'll see if they can get themselves in a place to be well prepared. Unfortunately, unfortunately for Colorado, Kansas State's off a bye too from that 42-20 win over Oklahoma State at home. Probably one of the better games throwing the football we've seen out of Avery Johnson. We know he can run, he's athletic, but 259 through the air, 3 passing touchdowns in that win against Oklahoma State. That was certainly good to see. Better passing attack proficiency and efficiency and explosiveness from the passing game of K-State. We know they've got Giddens running the football, who's excellent as well. So they can be a very balanced offense if we get that version of Avery Johnson on a regular basis. And that's going to be the question. I think what was surprising to me about the UCF game is Colorado had no run game to speak of this year, and finally they got the run game going a little bit. 128 on the ground against UCF. It's a step in the right direction. We'll see if they can keep that rolling here. Kansas State's been phenomenal at home at the Little Apple, but two road games this year. The Tulane game they nearly lost, easily could have lost because I thought the Tulane Green Wave got screwed out of a game-tying touchdown, and it should have been they called it offensive pass interference on Tulane, and it ended up costing them, and Kansas State hangs on 34-27. They did not cover in that game. And then we all saw the BYU game. Now, there was some, crazy bad luck for Kansas State, too, as, things just snowballed against them in the second and third quarter. Fumbles and punt return touchdowns and fumble return touchdowns and all that. And suddenly they were up 6-0 and then down 31-6 to BYU in the blink of an eye. But the fact remains, we've seen 2 data points here for Kansas State on the road, and they're 0-2 against the spread in those games. So I feel they can match up in the trenches with they could beat up Colorado in the trenches here, because I think K-State's better in the trenches than Colorado. But somehow, some way on the road, they've had lapses. Like I said, they almost lost to Tulane on the road. They got buried by BYU. Colorado's coming in off a bye week with a little momentum. I'm actually leaning to Deion and the Buffs here at plus 4.5. CMAC, what do you think here? Good Big 12 matchup, K-State, Colorado.
I know, so am I here. I think, from the inside out, like the lines, the offensive defensive lines are better for K-State, but Colorado, I just playing better, feeling it a little bit, and that's what it takes. 2 schools. And at home,
still have a few more playmakers than Kansas State with Travis Hunter on both sides of the ball, and
he's been
all the Wester, the receiver. I mean, they've just got Shadur, of course, the ultimate playmaker.
Of course, and he's been really good. This has just been a little bit, tough. I know they went in a tight game and came through against Tulane, and they've been pretty good on the road. I just think if this game is close, which I think it is, especially as Colorado line's been a little bit better, if they can hold up with the playmakers that they have, and of course Sanders.
That's going to decide the game, because K-State's no joke in the trenches.
Yeah, and one thing I like, the defense hasn't been. We'll see, like, because I think Kansas State can move the ball in this one as well. Can we get over? I don't know. Colorado played a little bit more unders. The last two have gone over. Obviously, that Baylor game and the UCF. Waiting for him at home. This place should be going nuts here in Boulder. I'm leading to Colorado. Catching the 5 at home. I think this game could be really good. It could win outright, or it was a close game, field goal or 4 points. And a tight when they lose.
All right, Arizona, BYU. We go from the one Big 12 game to another. BYU 4-point home favorites, 49.5 the total in this game. What's wrong with Arizona's offense? I'm starting to wonder. It's not what I thought it would be, because early in the year they had some good games and they shredded New Mexico. But really since then, 22 against Northern Arizona, 7 against Kansas State, 23 against Utah, albeit they won that game. Probably a solid showing against a good defense. But then last week, Texas Tech doesn't have a great defense, and they struggled. Noah Fafita and company to move the football for most of that game. It was settling for field goals. Fafita with 2 interceptions, bad decisions. And they're starting to look more and more like a team. And I know they got Conley, the running back, and they've got some other receivers. But if you shut down Tetaroa McMillan, it's starting to look like you shut down Arizona. So that's going to be something to watch for. Now they have to go on the road. BYU's been one of the surprises of the year. 5-0, they've looked awesome. Now their schedule's been light in some instances, like Baylor and Wyoming and Southern Illinois. But in the 2 really good wins, they had SMU on the road, 18-15, outright as dogs. Kansas State at home, 38-9 beatdown. They look really good. Jake Retzlaff is doing enough at the quarterback spot for this team. Without a doubt, he's got some mobility as well. You look at his numbers, 12 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, 61% completions, can move around a little bit in the pocket. They've got outstanding receivers in Darius Lassiter and Chase Roberts. These are 2 terrific receivers for BYU. I'm leaning BYU here. That they've got some Provo magic going. They've been very good at home. We just saw Arizona lose, at home against Texas Tech. We saw them in a Utah win. So it shows you maybe they're a good bet as road dogs. Well, Utah had Isaac Wilson, and you got to downgrade Utah with Isaac Wilson at quarterback. We talked about that earlier. Their other road game at Kansas State, they got shellacked, 31-7 Arizona. So I just like the way BYU's going here. BYU off a bye as well, following that win against Baylor. Extra time to prepare for Kalani Satake mushrooms, as I like to call them, for the BYU Cougars. So, I lean BYU here. I'm not stepping in front of this team. 5-0 straight up, 5-0 against the spread so far this season. CMAC, what do you think? Arizona, BYU.
Yeah, I can't either. I've been on them 3 times. They took care of business. Phil Kill. Yeah, if K-State was at home, it'd be different. I think that might be a good play. What's been good? BYU, good defense has been a little bit most surprising, and they've turnovers, been opportunistic. I don't know how great this defense is, but I think it's pretty good. And yeah, there's a problem with Arizona, this offense. I've already heard whispers that they're just not opening it up. They're not throwing it. It's just nothing's in sync. It's just not right. It made a couple big plays. Of course, he did at Utah. But other than that, it was very just ho-hum. I don't know. There seems nothing to them. And the defense gave it up last week. Can they go to Provo here? I can't do it. I think this game could be tight, but this is BYU or nothing. Fafia's a kid that could keep this in him, but one team's been money too, and one team that was the darling last year for me in Arizona is 1-4 ATS. Year to year, I don't want them now. They just haven't been there.
I chuckle at your comment there, keeping things in the. What the fuck are you saving it for, man? It's conference play. You've had tough opponents here these last few games. Texas Tech, Utah. What the hell are you saving it for? If you've got some things you want to show in the playbooks, show it. What are you waiting for, Arizona? Yeah, I mean, you're right. Their offense has just been a little bit disappointing of late, no doubt. All right, back to the SEC. South Carolina, Alabama. Alabama, 21-point home favorites, 50.5 the total. I mean, obviously the spot people are going to love Alabama here, right? Bounce back after that not dreadful loss. It is kind of dreadful because they never lose to Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt's a lot better this year. And I love Pavia. So it's not as bad a loss as some people think. And look, one loss doesn't kill you anymore. Not in today's climate of college football where there's a 12-team playoff. So from that standpoint, if you're Alabama, it's like I've said all show with UNLV and some of these other teams off their first loss. It's no woe is me. No moping around and feeling sorry for yourself. Get your ass up, practice hard this week, and get ready to bounce back. I should be a coach. Listen to the way I'm talking here. I could get through to players with that kind of mindset. Yeah. And look, I saw enough from South Carolina last week. Look, they struggled on defense against Ole Miss. And then, gosh, they really liked Lenoris Sellers, and he looked okay in camp. There's a long way to go for this guy at quarterback. That was ugly for that South Carolina offense against Ole Miss over the weekend. They just did not move the football. 3 points, dreadful performance. Sellers not very efficient. 1 interception. Run game was shut down. You got to give Lane Kiffin credit because that was a kick in the teeth loss to Kentucky. And to bounce back like that against South Carolina, very impressive. But, losing 27-3 at home to Ole Miss and now trusting you to go on the road against an angry, pissed off Alabama team, I'm not doing that. So, yeah, I would lay it with Alabama or nothing. Maybe a first half full game split, maybe an Alabama team total over. Milroe and the offense bounce back. Actually, the offense wasn't their issue against Vandy.
It's his defense. That's what I want to get to.
But can South Carolina exploit it? That was horrendous. That was horseshit from the South Carolina offense against Ole Miss last week. So, yeah, for me, it's Alabama or pass, C-Mac. What do you think here?
Yeah, that offense, it wasn't great, but and the Ole Miss defense is pretty good. That's why I liked it. I mean, I had the under in the game, but I thought South Carolina could do something, and it just didn't happen. It just seemed like they couldn't get anything going in the end. They're sacked a ton. It was awful there. I think it's a bounce back for Bama. Like, I don't really want to lay 3 touchdowns with them though. Like, I don't, and their defense is like, hey, now that second half, of course, is Georgia scoring all those points, but Vandy last week, like, they need to get back to the drawing board a little bit. But can South Carolina take advantage of that? This is a lot. I get the bounce back angle, but I'm not rushing here to lay it with Bama. No way.
I would rather lay it with Alabama here than lay it with Kentucky at this point in time. That's the way I see it. Like I said, because you got Vandy coming off the bet against spot, coming off that win, and you got Alabama in the bet on spot here off that loss. I feel more comfortable with Alabama minus 21 than Kentucky minus 14. Doesn't mean I'll for sure be on Alabama. I sure as hell won't be on South Carolina. I'll tell you that. All right, Stanford and Notre Dame. Notre Dame 23.5 point home favorites, 45 the total in this game. Stanford, they've kind of fallen back a little bit these last two. The Clemson game, don't be fooled. They moved the ball and they just turned it over, stopped on downs, or they probably could have scored more and covered that game. There was nothing about the Virginia Tech game that impresses you about Stanford's offense. Lamson, the quarterback, was awful. They made the decision to go to him. He was not very good. 13 of 24. There was no run game to speak of. Credit to Virginia Tech. That was a great game. Great response after just a very, very painful loss against Miami. They left it all out there, Virginia Tech, and to bounce back like they did against Stanford, very good. But for Stanford, that was ugly on the offensive side of the football. This to me is an under for CMAC with this game, I think, because Stanford to move the ball up and down the field against Notre Dame, I'm not sure that's going to happen here in this game. We'll see if Troy Taylor goes back to Ashton Daniels this week, because clearly Justin Lamson really didn't do a lot to show he's ready to be the number one quarterback with that performance against Virginia Tech. You know how I feel about Notre Dame when they're in this price range, 23. I'm not interested. But do I think Stanford can be good enough offensively to stay inside this number or get inside this number? That's the question I have going into this game, C-Mac. Go ahead.
That's consistently been my question for them the last couple of years. And they showed up a little bit in that Syracuse game. I was a little bit shocked because they had got me when they just didn't do anything. Yeah, Lamson, I saw enough of him last year. He was awful. This week, yeah, I think with Daniels, if he's all right to go, and everything this week. And Notre Dame's beat the shit kind of out of Stanford. Every once in a while, they used to have some tight games, but if they don't, they have to be able to score. And I don't know if they can against this Notre Dame defense. But Notre Dame over 3 touchdowns, especially at home, it just is not, it's just not profitable at all.
No, I agree.
I just can't do it. This is quickly. If Stanford scores, this could get over, and Notre Dame could score enough, maybe on their own, to get it over. But maybe they just need like 14 Stanford here, and Notre Dame gets mid-30s, and that'll get this over. But yeah, I don't want that either. Stanford unders have been pretty good this year too.
Let's not forget the Trees won at Notre Dame 2 years ago. The last time they were here, 16-14.
That's the last, close one, kind of.
Yep, yeah, 16.5-point dogs, won outright. Stanford. I'm leaning Stanford. I am. I
take the points or nothing.
Notre Dame. All you have to do is look at this season. They've been a home favorite of more than 3 touchdowns twice against 2 MAC schools, Miami O and Northern Illinois. They failed to cover both of them. And of course, they lost outright to Northern Illinois. So no, not in this price range. It's never a bet for me with Notre Dame. It's plus their run defense, Stanford, hasn't been that bad. And most of Notre Dame's offense is on the ground with Riley Leonard running. He's been off kind of erratic throwing it. So the run defense is actually, they're giving up 3.2 yards per carry, 86 rushing yards per game to Stanford.
That would help out. Notre Dame should try to throw it because we all talked about Stanford's the pass defense a little bit better this year, but they were dead last year. They were dreadful.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
can they get the passing game going? Yep. They get the
with Leonard.
That's going to be the big question here. All right, Red River rivalry time. Next up, Texas and Oklahoma. This is, of course, at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, as it always is. Texas, 14.5-point road, neutral field favorites. 49 the total. Of course, this is the first time it's an SEC Red River rivalry game. After all these years in the Big 12, the 2 new entrants into the SEC. Usually I have a pretty strong opinion on this game. This year, not so much. Oklahoma defensively can hang in there, potentially. And look, they've been a point spread machine in this series, 4-2 against the spread. They've won 5 of the last 6 meetings against Texas outright, including last year. Oklahoma was a 4-point dog and won outright 34-30 against Texas. Texas has had some tough times with Oklahoma. And I don't feel totally comfortable laying more than 2 touchdowns with them. This Oklahoma offense is a real problem. They beat Auburn because of the defense. Hawkins is still a work in progress. I believe they're going to probably stick with him at this point at quarterback. I see no reason to go back to Jackson Arnold. They are banged up and beaten up to shit, by the way, at receiver, Oklahoma. Deion Brooks, Jaleel Farouk, Nick Anderson. There's a bunch of questionables. They have cluster injuries at wide receiver going into this game. That's concerning as well, because if Texas goes up by 14 or 17 or 21, can Oklahoma come back through the back door? I'm not so sure. On the flip side, you look at Texas, and very impressive, including the win at Michigan, which was their signature win this year. But they have faced, Colorado State's not been great. UTSA's a bit down. Monroe and Mississippi State, this will be tougher here. I do think Texas is a decent amount better than Oklahoma, though. So, like I said, it's a pass. I think Texas wins. It's a question of, do they cover the number? I don't trust Oklahoma enough. Even getting 14.5 with injuries at receiver in that offense. I don't trust it enough. And Texas does have a legit defense, and we know what they can do on offense. A question for Texas, too, who's starting at quarterback? Are we going to get a returning Quinn Ewers? He's been upgraded to questionable. He continues to practice. There is a good chance he might be available and back for this game against Oklahoma. And even if it isn't Quinn Ewers and it's Arch Manning again, that guy's no slouch. He can play, and he's certainly shown that already. So, not a strong opinion. I think Texas wins. Small lean to Texas, but again, you also see Oklahoma's played this team tough, and I'm not comfortable laying more than 2 touchdowns. C-Mac, what do you think here?
If Texas is, for real and the best team, maybe in the country, they will go in there and win by 2 touchdowns or more.
They also should be fired up. They know Oklahoma beat them last year, and they know, hey, we're better than them this year. Let's be out for blood, right?
They lose consistently to them, though, and even the games Texas have won, they've been close. I know there was a blowout a couple years ago. Man, what was that? 42-0, 49-0. But that's been about it. These games have been close. Yeah, I worry about all year the line with Oklahoma, their offensive line. Hawkins just came in and he's got some great speed. That run against Auburn a couple weeks ago, but yeah, the receivers, the running backs, they've just been banged up, and they went in. They haven't been great. They haven't been a ton of playmakers for them. Texas is loaded. I don't think it matters who plays at quarterback. Either one of them, I think it's fine. This is just a lot of points. I want to look into the injury a little bit more with Oklahoma, but man, at the Cotton Bowl, catching 14 and a half, you know where I'm leaning. Oklahoma or nothing.
All right, next up, Ole Miss and LSU. Ole Miss 3-point road favorite, 64 the total in this game. That was an incredible loss that LSU suffered. I remember it to Ole Miss last year. I know that's just such a heartbreaker that they suffered. It was, 55-49 Ole Miss. So it is a revenge spot for LSU. And they are a home dog. Yeah, won't see that too often. But here we go again. When they face someone that I think's on their level or better than them, I don't trust Brian Kelly to get the job done. I don't. I still don't, even though they're getting 3 here. I could only look at Ole Miss here. Now, if it goes above 3, I wouldn't be interested. But if it stays right where it is, I see some 2.5s are still out there as well on Ole Miss. I think they get it done. Ole Miss has trouble with the physical teams. Good in the trenches, pass rush, get after the quarterback, get after Jackson Dart, pressure him. That's not LSU. They have a sieve defense. They had it last year. I don't think their defense is that much better this year because I remember who have they played? USC, that they struggled in that game and they lost. South Carolina ripped them apart, and that's a South Carolina offense that couldn't do anything against Ole Miss. Look at that common opponent. South Carolina. LSU gives up 33, life and death to beat South Carolina in that game. And Ole Miss just beat them 27-3 and completely shut them down. So, yeah, I mean, I could only look at the Lane train here and Ole Miss 3 or better. Lean over the total as well in this one. Should see points. 64 is pretty high, but, Ole Miss should be able to have
teams
success.
Have gone under.
They have. Too. They have. That is I don't love the over. I like the Ole Miss side more, but we did obviously see 65 2 years ago. 104 in the matchup last year. We're not going to see 104 this time, but I think we can see 65. So I do like over. I like Ole Miss more, though. Like I said, LSU, Brian Kelly in these big games. Big game Brian Kelly, he is not. And we have seen that clearly. C-Mac, what do you think?
Big time Brian Kelly, he is not. But big game Lane Kiffin isn't either.
That's true.
In mid game, he might like LSU.
Yep.
But usually it's like Bama, he loses in Georgia. That's his kind of deal. But Ole Miss, these have kind of been some struggle spots. Not always, and not to LSU and kind of the mid tier the last few years. But night games at Tiger Stadium are
true. Night game,
no joke.
Yep, it's a good quarterback matchup. Dart and Nussmeier. That'll be a good one.
If they're going, could we get the points? Maybe. I think Ole Miss. LSU's looked a little bit better on who they played defensively, but I think Ole Miss kind of has the better defense from everything I've seen, especially last week. Even against Kentucky in the loss, the defenses look good. That's what I've been most impressed with. And one team's garbage, of course, against the number. Brian Kelly and LSU, and Lane Kiffin, especially against teams he beats up. He's been money. It's tough for me. I think this game could be tight at night. I don't know. I can't go with Brian Kelly, though. Weirdly, if it's like 2.5, 3, I take Ole Miss. Yep. I really would. I think they're better in the end. Maybe they don't drub them, but I think they could sneak out of there with a win. Nothing when it comes to Kelly, the defense. I just can't get there to back LSU. It'd be Ole Miss. They need this win too, Ole Miss. I think they lost already. They need to win. Yeah.
As far as regular season, I agree. Lane's had some bad regular season moments too, like Brian Kelly. But I just look back at the bowl games last year. At least Lane Kiffin had his team ready to go and beat a really good Penn State team in the Peach Bowl. And then there's Brian Kelly against Wisconsin, and they got their doors blown off in that game. So, that tells you, like I say, I'll still put a little more faith in Lane Kiffin than I would Brian Kelly right now. But that's a good
LSU
game.
dealing with some injuries too on the D
Yes.
line, but I'll look into that later. Yeah.
Daryl, I think the under might hit here. I'm not as looking at the numbers. Ole Miss does look to have not just a little bit, but a lot better defense this year. Ole Miss so far. Yeah.
I'm waiting for them to maybe have like a shootout type game. Maybe not the crazy one, but yeah, they really haven't had that. I mean, defense has been really good, but a lot of cupcakes early on. But to see Kentucky, the loss in last week,
yeah,
I mean, just to shut South Carolina down, yeah, it was impressive.
All right, Big Ten, Minnesota, UCLA. We've got the Golden Gophers, 5.5-point road favorites, 40 the total in this game. I mean, I lean under in this game. Whose offense is moving the ball? UCLA with Ethan Garbage. Oh, sorry. I mean, Ethan Garbers. I don't know if he's moving the ball against Minnesota. Minnesota's offense is still very, pedestrian. I know they won great win against USC last week, but it was really more so the defense really clamped down than anything that Max Brosmer and the Minnesota offense did. So I understand why that total is 40, the way it is right there in that game. Look at this UCLA team, 13-7. They haven't cracked 20 points this season. Even the game they won against Hawaii, they only scored 16. They haven't scored 20 in a game this year, UCLA.
The offense is bad. Yeah, it's really bad.
It's not very good. And in fact, actually, it was not Garbers last week. It was Justin Martin getting the nod at quarterback for Penn State. Not much better, though. It's okay, but again, there's just not a lot of playmakers. The O-line's not very good. I don't think the play calling's that good. It's just not a very good Minnesota UCLA offense right now. But their defense is at times hung in there. I mean, you have to factor in. They played Penn State. They played Oregon, LSU. They've given up Indiana, but they've gotten better. They've definitely gotten better week by week. Indiana was a disaster. LSU wasn't great. Oregon, they hung in there, though. They did get a pick six of Dylan Gabriel. And I thought they hung in there really well against a good Penn State offense. They're definitely making strides on defense here in this game. For the first, 1-4, obviously, against the or 3-2, I should say. They did cover They've covered 3 in a row, actually, UCLA. Keep that in mind. 17-point loss at LSU, but they covered. 21-point loss against Oregon at home, but they covered. They were 23.5-point dogs. 29.5-point dogs at Penn State. They lose by 16. And then you've got Minnesota coming off a huge win. They're going nuts at the TCF Bank Stadium. The big win against USC saves the job of PJ Fleck temporarily. Now, after a win like that, you got to go all the way to the West Coast, which is, I think this is the first time Minnesota's doing that this year. Yeah, this is their first West Coast game in the new look Big Ten, taking on UCLA. I'm leaning Bruins, crazy as it is to say. They've covered 3 in a row. I worried like hell about their offense moving the football, but I don't know if Minnesota's marking football up and down the field either in this game against UCLA's defense and a potential hangover spot after the win against USC. So UCLA and under, I'm leaning in that direction with this game side and total. CMAC, what do you think?
Yeah, UCLA covering. They got the last second touchdown, in the last seconds of that game. The defense, it has hung around a little bit, has been awful. And can Martin here at home, maybe have a better game against, defense that's solid in Minnesota, but not as good as Penn State. I don't trust.
That's a baptism by fire. You're right about that. Playing against Penn State for your first start.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
It's questionable. Yes. If it is Martin again, this will be a little more digestible at home against Minnesota.
Yeah, he's not playing in front of 101,000 there at Penn State. And I thought when I saw this line, UCLA's covered these big numbers, and Minnesota wins. They ran the football great. Can they do that? Like UCLA, maybe hold them in check. Not as good as last year, their run defense. I was hoping this was going to be over 7. Yeah. Man. I was like, if this was over a touchdown or 8, I was going to pound UCLA, and it's 5.5. This is super sharp, I think. Yeah. I can't take them. I lean under 40 here. I wanted to look at it a little bit more just because UCLA hasn't been able to score points. If they're in this game, it's going to have to be 17-13. I don't know, unless Martin all of a sudden can turn this offense around that just doesn't have playmakers. Tough. It's just for now, it's just a pass after all that.
Nothing wrong with that. All right. One of the games of the day might be the game of the day. This is NBC Saturday night, Big Ten Saturday night. It'll be Noah Eagle and Todd Blackledge calling it from Eugene, Oregon. One of the biggest games of the year in the Big Ten for sure. Ohio State and Oregon. We've got Ohio State 3.5-point road favorites, 53 being the total here in this game. I'm sticking to my guns, C-Mac. I love me some Jeremiah Smith. I love me some Henderson at running back. That Ohio State offense is, and Will Howard's a heck of a competitor. He can run. He's shown some toughness. I get all that, but you're laying more than a field goal on the road. I said Oregon would win the Big Ten before the season started. I think I've been less impressed, C-Mac, with Oregon to this point of the season than Ohio State. Like, there's been some games where it's like, what the hell, Oregon? Like Idaho, you struggled like that. Yeah. You struggled with Boise State the way you did. Lethargic against UCLA for a bit of that game. But at more than a field goal now as a home dog in that environment in Eugene on a Saturday night or late Saturday afternoon with this game being local time 4:30 out there, I'm taking Oregon here at more than a field goal. I think it's a nip and tuck game. Two really good football teams, two good offenses, two good quarterbacks. Will Howard on the Ohio State side, Dylan Gabriel on the Oregon side. And I will say this about Oregon. Okay, if they don't turn it over a few times against Michigan State last week, that's a destruction. And they took it easy on Michigan State in the second half of that game. So even though they didn't cover, don't penalize Oregon for that. They were dominant over Michigan State in that game. And if not for turnovers, and then they took their foot off the gas pedal, I think, late in that game with this game on deck, which is part of why I like Michigan State getting all those points last week against Oregon. And yes, it was an easy, ugly cover, but they did get inside the number. Great game. Absolutely phenomenal game. And maybe Ohio State goes in there and wins, and maybe wins by 6 or 7 and covers the number. But I think there's value in this number with Oregon. C-Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, and I mean, this is what Oregon has circled here all year, really, and have been waiting for. And if Oregon doesn't these things, kick themselves, shoot themselves in the foot, penalties, turnovers, if they are good here, they're in it. So I definitely, want the 3.5, 4 points. Just off the eye test, I think Ohio State might be better a little bit, but this is finally a game on the road where they got to travel to. And this is where I wanted to see Will Howard, because he's looked really good and he is a competitor, but I saw him make plenty of mistakes at K-State over the years, especially in big games. So we'll see. Two teams are good. You know what's sharp, I think, is his total. I think it's right. I didn't want to mess with it. I could see it going under.
Be careful
but
with the over here. And I say that because Ohio State is not playing fast or as fast on offense as they used to.
And the defense has been great.
Yeah.
I mean, so far. Who they play?
Yeah, they slow it down too.
Yeah, and I mean, Oregon, and we saw the one team, though, have success, really, Boise, that can move the ball. The other teams have horrible offenses. Michigan State, UCLA, they're just awful. They don't have good offenses. So Oregon does. I don't want to mess with it. They both have been slow. Both have had that big leads, Babano, so they've sat on them. So the games have gone under some of these games. I just don't know what we get, because I think it could have turned into maybe some points and get over. But Ohio State might be better. I'll dare them, to go in there and win by 5 or more, basically a touchdown.
Which is not easy to do, obviously. This is an absolutely phenomenal watch, obviously, on Saturday. Looking forward to it. And to me, the eye test says, like you said, which is why I think they're favored by 3.5 on the road here. Ohio State looks like they've been better. They've looked like they've been a little bit better just overall, how sharp they've been.
They've been crisper, out of the two. Mm-hmm.
No doubt. But, quantify crisper or sharper when Akron, Western Michigan, Marshall, Michigan State, and Iowa are your opponents. That's another thing, too. I mean, this is definitely a step up for Ohio State here in this game. And Oregon's schedule has not been the toughest either, but they had the Boise game in there. And Boise is one of the best, certainly one of the best group of 5 teams in the country. But great game. Like I said, though, I said Oregon would win that conference before it started. So that's why I feel at plus 3.5, I need to be on them here. But that's a great game. There's no doubt. All right, Washington and Iowa. We've got the Hawkeyes minus 2.5-point home favorites. The total 41 in this game. I actually lean Iowa. I can't believe I'm saying that. But the reason for that is I don't trust Washington on the road fully. Washington got the big win against Michigan last week. It was probably the best game they've played all year. Will Rogers and the offense was solid. I thought their defense was just outstanding. They really, really bottled up the Michigan ground game and made life difficult for them. It was a great defensive performance from Washington. But I also remember when they went to Rutgers before that, they lost 21-18. They were sloppy as fuck. They turned the ball over. The offense didn't finish drives. The kicker missed a bunch of field goals. You're right, Phil. That's a big issue. Gross, the kicker. It's been gross watching him kick.
I know,
yeah, it's gross. Yeah, fits his last name. It's not been good for him kicking field goals. He's missed a bunch lately, and that's concerning too, especially when you got to go on the road and win this game. And look, Iowa, they've taken their lumps. They got beat down in the second. That was a drubbing in the second half. They kept it close for one half, and then Ohio State just took over last week, 35-7. They lost to Iowa State. They faced pretty weak teams other than that. Cade McNamara is still a work in progress. I mean, 14 for 20 with one interception. Just, I can't say I'm shocked. I mean, that's what he is. He's a, fringe quarterback. And when Caleb Johnson gets shut down, it becomes difficult for Iowa to win games, and he was shut down by Ohio State. And when you look at Washington's defense, they're only giving up 3.9 yards per carry, 130.5 on the ground per game. So it does feel like Iowa might have tough sledding here moving the football because Washington does have a solid run defense. But I don't fully trust Washington overall, including even their offense and Rodgers on the road after seeing what they did at Rutgers, losing that game. So I actually kind of lean Iowa, less than a field goal at Kinnick here in a bounce back spot. I actually think the better bet might be under 41. I think this could be. I know Iowa had gone over in every game, but it finally stayed under last week against Ohio State. And I don't know if these two offenses are going up and down the field here, especially with Washington's strength on D being against the run. CMAC, what do you think?
That's where I've been kind of impressed with Washington is the defense, and it's this one finally that stays under, that one did last week, but I mean, for the most part, scored. Something even in the Michigan game, that game got over, similar total. I stayed off of that Bavano. It just got over. But they executed. Rodgers was good. They ran the ball not solid, good enough. Latu, they got Jackson. That Boston kid is a good receiver for Washington. He had another good game. So look out for him to maybe make some plays. The traveling stuff is tough. Yeah, Washington, it's like they went to New Jersey, outplayed Rutgers, but yet shot himself in the foot like you talked about. Missed field goals, downs, they outgained him, but couldn't get it done in the end. And I saw it similar against Washington State where that happened. And if that happens here, they will lose a close game and I won't win. So, God, this one's tough for me. I think this is kind of maybe a good spot to fade Washington and lean Iowa at just this short number. But I think the game's tight. So, I lean under. Nothing here for me early. I'd like to take Iowa. I don't know if I get here.
It's an interesting game. We'll see how it goes. We stay in the Big Ten. Penn State, USC. Penn State, 5.5-point road favorites, 48 the total in this game. This is Penn State's first long trek out west this season as part of the new look Big Ten. Look, they were workmanlike against UCLA, but it wasn't a fluid performance. Wasn't overly crisp and sharp from Drew Aller and the offense. 27-11 against UCLA.
All year it hasn't.
Yeah,
I don't think. Savannah.
Illinois would start and stop with that offense. All of a sudden, they've kind of looking like last year's offense. And we're still living off that West Virginia game, the first game of the year where they shredded West Virginia. Think, oh, look, there's a new offense, explosive down the field. And no, not the last couple weeks anyway. Gosh, I can't believe I'm saying it. I lean USC here. Back home, be it a tough loss, but back home, long way away from home now for Penn State. Problem is there's a big difference defensively with these two. And I know Danton Lynn, they've been a little bit better, but with the game on the line, they couldn't stop Michigan. They couldn't stop Minnesota. And that's the biggest fear. If this game's close and they compete, which I think USC can they get a stop when they need it against Drew Aller? And the Nittany Lions offense, I'm not so sure because they've shown they can't do it. So I lean USC, but am I running to bet it? No. CMAC, what do you think?
That's exactly how I feel a little bit. I haven't been impressed. If you took UCLA, they covered. Or Illinois did. I had the under. That was great. The week before, they blew out, got it on their own. We talked about that against Kent State. 56-0, got over the total there, their team total. Yeah, SC, the stops just haven't been there for them. I know the second half at home, it was solid against Wisconsin, but man, that was tough in that one. But they did cover. I don't know. I just Moss. I think he's all right. You know, SC has some big playmakers. I want to look to him, and I'm interested here. I'm interested in SC. You know, I'm big on Penn State. I do think Penn State has the better defense. Like, and for them to go in there and win here by a touchdown, I think it's possible. I got to look at SC a little bit more. I don't think the defense it's somewhat improved, but I don't know if it's there. There's enough for me to bet. This is just, the big road game on the West Coast. And can SC come back? You know, after a couple losses, we already saw them, what they look like against Michigan and Minnesota. So are they on their level? This is a team in Penn State who regularly have beat those teams. So I think the line's sharp. You know, I'm off here as well early. I lean under. Are we going to get points? I don't know.
That's a good question.
Is the offense going to wake up here?
Miller Moss hasn't been phenomenal either. Let's not forget that.
He's been okay. Yeah, he's just been all right. Yes.
That's exactly it. He's been okay, but he hasn't been absolutely tremendous by any stretch of the imagination. So, yeah, I do get concerned a little bit as far as the offense. I mean, Miller Moss looked great in the win against LSU, and it kind of feels like since that game, C-Mac, he's been okay. He's been all right, but he's not been wow. Wow.
I mean, last week he had a couple picks.
Yeah. So that's what would concern me a little bit here about taking USC, is that while we talk about the defense and last year it being bad, 2 years ago it being bad, and this year in the key moments of games they haven't gotten stops, the bottom line is this is a LSU or a USC offense that, you know, I thought Miller Moss would really be great this year because he was awesome in the bowl game, and it's been kind of hit or miss for USC's offense at times this year so far. So we'll see how they play here. All right, we have gotten to the final game now of this edition of Hitting the Books, and we're going out west for Boise State and Hawaii. Boise State making the trip to the island for this one against the Warriors. Boise State 21-point road favorites. Total sitting at 61.5 across the board. Obviously, it's the Ashton Genty show. Let's be real. That's what it's become. It's the traveling Ashton Genty show here for this game between Boise State and Hawaii. And what a show it's been. This guy's got so much Barry Sanders in him, hybrid Barry Sanders and Derrick Henry. It's unbelievable. Like he's physical. You can't bring him down. He breaks tackles. He's got underrated speed in the open field. This team running the football has been a sight to behold. The question is, and that's the first thing that's the first place you have to go to and look at when you're handicapping Boise State games these days. Can the opponent stop the run? And when you look at Hawaii, the run defense actually hasn't been that bad. 3.8 rushing yards per carry, 3.8 yards per carry, and 120 rushing yards per game. But they have not seen anything close to an Ashton Genty so far. And when you look at these first few opponents, UCLA doesn't have much of a run game. Sam Houston does. Sam Houston does have a pretty good run game. And in that game, Sam Houston ran for 257 against Hawaii. So I'd be concerned about Hawaii matching up with Ashton Genty, because so far it looks to me like nobody's been able to match up with him so far. So that's definitely something to watch for moving forward with this team. I think on the flip side, when you look at Hawaii's offense, which I expected this team to be pretty good on offense with Braden Shager. And we continue to see it in little spurts here and there, but not for a full game. I thought they were a lot better against San Diego State, but then all of a sudden defense not getting to stop when it mattered. They lose 27-24 to a San Diego State team that's still adjusting to a new offense and a new system and a new scheme. So I'd be concerned here a little bit. And again, while the rush numbers are great, overall for the season, skewed because they face teams that aren't great running the football or don't run the football consistently. UCLA and Northern Iowa. And you look at the San Diego State game. What did San Diego State game? Well, they did a good job there, but San Diego State's not the run team they were, because with Sean Lewis, they're throwing the ball a lot more. They're more of a pass-heavy offense now with that up-tempo, new-look San Diego State offense. The one game against a great run team, running the football, great ground attack, was Sam Houston, and Hawaii got shredded in that game against the run. So that's why I'm concerned about Hawaii matching up here against Ashton Genty. So I lean over. Boise might be able to get their points because I worry about the Hawaii run defense. Hawaii, I think, can score a little bit. Boise's defense is still, they're not a shutdown defense. They'll give up points. We've seen it every single week. 30 to Utah State, 24 to Washington State, 37 to Oregon, 45
every
to
week.
Southern. Yeah. They're an over team, dead nuts over team. 5-0 to the over this year, Boise. Now, I know Hawaii's 4-1 to the under, but I think that might change here. C-Mac, what do you think?
There's two. It's, the over where Boise's been good and Hawaii has it. And it's going to be 39-40. Boise's team total. I mean, they've got 62, 45, 56, 34 against Oregon. So right there. And 56 against Georgia Southern. You're telling me they don't get 40? And they've kicked the shit out of Hawaii consistently. The matter with offenses that haven't been as good. Boise, 40, 31, 59, 52, 55, 49, 42. Give me their team total. Like, I'll bite it. I mean, if they score 38 here and I lose this, I could take it. But I think they get their team total, which is going to be right there, 39, 40. And I think the full game could get there, too. Hawaii gets a few scores, 2 or 3. So I agree with it.
All right, good stuff.
Boise.
All right, great show, as always. Shout out to everyone in the chat tuning in. Just quickly, Phil the Kill, Oldie, Nasty Nate, Gold Jew, Myron Kidd, Daryl Turner, Ross Pitts, everyone in the chat that joined us, Rance earlier on, Slippery Rock, like I said, Myron Kidd, Tom Leach, everyone, Bama Boy, Kongs Clips, Al Cervic, everyone, again, Gorion, Bama Boy, Talk Sports with JT. Appreciate all of you. Hit the like button on the way out. Good timing because we got some baseball just about to start. Little playoff baseball with Detroit and Cleveland about to get going. For what it's worth, I'm on Tigers' first 5 full game split. Let's be real. They got to have this. They've got their guy on the mound, Tarek Skubal. Got to have this game if you're Detroit. So, I like Tigers' first 5 full game split. Lean Kansas City a little bit with Reagans in the second game. He pitched really well in that first game in the playoffs for him in the last series against who do they play again? Kansas City.
I am on him. I got to take him. I mean, let's see what Rodon we get. We get the dominant. I mean, I think Royals can get some off him. Lefty's all right. So
they do. Yeah, I lean more so Royals. I lean slightly full game over, but I like the Royals side more than that. And I think it's a dead nuts under the first game, Detroit Cleveland. But 6, it got down to 6 that total.
6.
God, it's tough to bet under when it's 6 like
Caesar
that.
said a 5.5 here for a minute. 5.5.
Yeah.
Woo.
No doubt. Great stuff, C-Mac. Final thoughts before we say goodbye.
Yeah, another great show. I love doing this, breaking it down. We will have the videos out here in the next day or two. Hopefully later tonight I'll have them out. But appreciate everyone in the chat. Just hit the like button. That's all we ask for. Everything that we do. And tell everyone to subscribe. Tell your brothers, sisters, brother's uncle, whatever. Tell them, subscribe to Hitting the Books. We appreciate all the love we've been getting. Same old show. Just on our channel, and we're trying to build it back and get rolling. So appreciate all the support out there. Thank you. That is it.
That's it indeed. Great stuff, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube on the way out. For Connor Mack, I'm Ian Cameron. This has been another edition of the College Football Hitting the Book Show. Enjoy Week 7 in college football, and good luck. And we will be back with you next Monday, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific, for another edition of the College Football Hitting the Books. And until then, class dismissed.